Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a nice idea if everyone can leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. It was a little past 11 when I left my sister's place. She'd made dinner, and we ended up talking way longer than I planned. I didn't realize how late it was until I stepped outside and saw how hard it was raining. The kind of rain that bounces off the pavement and makes the whole world look blurry. I hadn't thought to bring a jacket, so by the time I got in the car, I was soaked down to my socks. The roads were pretty empty. Just the steady rhythm of the wipers and the hiss of the tires slicing through puddles. I had about a 40-minute drive home, mostly through back roads, faster than the highway, especially this late, and less traffic. But there weren't many streetlights, just stretches of black trees and little flashes of my headlights reflecting off signs or wet branches. A few miles in, I noticed the wipers were starting to streak. I squinted through the glass, leaned forward a little. Visibility was crap, and every few seconds the road would vanish behind a curtain of water before the wipers cleared it again. I kept both hands on the wheel, tense, trying to focus. I remember passing a gas station, lights off, closed for the night, and right after that, the road curved and dipped into this wooded section. No houses, no businesses, just thick trees lining both sides like a tunnel. I'd driven it plenty of times, but that night, it felt different. I don't know how else to describe it. Just still. Like the whole road was holding its breath. That's when I saw him. It was only for a second. The wipers cleared the windshield and there he was, dead center in the lane, maybe 20 feet ahead, just standing there. A man. No flashlight. No umbrella, no movement. Just standing. I slammed on the brakes and blinked, and in the next swipe of the wipers, he was gone. Not farther down the road. Not off to the side. Gone. And then there was a knock at my window. Not loud. Not frantic. Just a single knock. Right next to my face. I jumped so hard my foot slipped off the brake. I looked to the left and there he was, inches away, leaning down slightly to peer in. He wasn't soaked. That was the first thing I noticed. His clothes were damp, yeah, but not the way you'd expect if he'd been walking in that downpour. His hair looked dry. He wasn't even shivering. Just standing there, looking at me like he knew I'd stop. Like he'd been waiting for it. I couldn't move. I just stared back at him. He didn't smile. Didn't wave. Just stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, staring at me with this flat expression. His face looked normal enough, maybe mid-30s, short beard, average build, but there was something off about the way he was holding himself. Too still. Like he was trying not to look threatening, but hadn't practiced how to fake it. He leaned in a little and mouthed something. I couldn't hear him over the rain and the engine. I shook my head. He mouthed it again, a little slower. I think he was saying, "Can I come in?" That broke whatever weird freeze I was in. I put the car in drive and swerved around him. I didn't even check the opposite lane. Just floored it. My heart was going nuts. I checked the mirror, he hadn't moved. Just stood there in the road, watching me. The red glow of my taillights made him look darker, like a shadow or a cutout of a person. A couple minutes later, I started to doubt what I'd seen. Not that I'd seen him, he was real, but the whole thing felt unreal. Like maybe I was more tired than I realized, and my brain had twisted some harmless situation into something creepy. Maybe he'd just been a stranded driver trying to get help. Maybe I overreacted. I kept telling myself that until I passed another car coming the other way. Just a beat-up sedan, but I slowed a little, partly out of habit and partly because I suddenly had this stupid idea that I should flash my lights and warn them. But by the time I thought it, we'd already passed each other. Then my phone buzzed. I had it face down in the passenger seat, but the vibration caught my attention. I picked it up at the next red light. I was back near a residential area by then and saw a text from an unknown number. It just said, "That wasn't very nice." I froze. I didn't have the number saved. It wasn't close enough to anyone I knew. And there was no previous message. Just that one. I checked to see if it was spoofed somehow, but there was nothing. Just a 10-digit number I didn't recognize. I didn't reply. I locked the phone and threw it back on the seat. 10 minutes later, I was home. I parked in my usual spot in the lot behind the building. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by then, and the street was quiet. I sat in the car for a minute, trying to decide if I should even go inside. Part of me wanted to just keep driving, like putting distance between me and that stretch of road would somehow help. But eventually, I grabbed my stuff and ran inside. Locked the door behind me, latched the deadbolt, and turned on every light in the apartment. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the TV on, trying not to imagine hearing footsteps in the hallway or seeing movement at the window. Every little noise made me jump. It was like I couldn't convince myself the night was actually over. At around 4 a.m., I finally started to relax a little. The rain had stopped. The sun was probably going to come up soon. I hadn't gotten another text. Maybe whoever it was had moved on. Maybe it really was just some sick joke. Then I heard it. A sound from outside. Not loud. Just the soft beep beep of a car unlocking. I live on the second floor, and my window faces the lot. I stood up slowly and peeked through the blinds. My car was the only one with lights blinking. The driver's side door was open. I didn't see anyone. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and called the non-emergency number for the cops. I told them someone was messing with my car. They said they'd send someone out to take a look. 15 minutes later, an officer showed up. He walked around my car, checked inside, then came up to my door. I buzzed him in. He said nothing was stolen. Nothing broken. Just the door open and a footprint on the driver's seat, muddy, pressed into the fabric like someone had knelt on it. I didn't understand what that meant until he said, "It looks like whoever it was climbed inside. Could have been hiding in there." I felt sick. He offered to take a report, but there wasn't much to go on. I didn't get a plate from the road, didn't see a car near mine when I got home, didn't have a name or even a good look at the guy's face. Just a message and a footprint. I changed my locks the next day. Got a steering wheel lock. Started parking on the street under a light instead of in the back. I even got a little camera for the dashboard. Nothing else happened after that. No more texts. No more knocks on the window. Just this weird hole in my routine where fear lived for a few weeks. But I still don't drive that road anymore, even when I'm late. I take the highway now, no matter what. It had been raining since late afternoon, the kind that just didn't let up. Constant drizzle at first, then sheets of it coming down sideways. I left work late, around 10, and by the time I parked and jogged up to my building, I was soaked down to my socks, even with a jacket. I live on the second floor in a small apartment complex, nothing fancy. Just a square lot with 12 units and a staircase in the middle. My place is tucked in the back corner, one of those layouts where the living room has a sliding glass door that opens to a small balcony, mostly for looks. There's a tree right outside it, close enough that the branches tap the railing when it's windy. That night, they were tapping like crazy. I let myself in and kicked off my wet shoes by the door. Everything was quiet. I remember the air inside felt weird warmer than it should have been, kind of damp. I figured it was just from the rain and my own body heat. I dropped my bag and peeled off my jacket, then headed to the kitchen to heat up some leftover pasta. The microwave humming was the only sound for a while, then I heard something that made me pause, just this soft squeaking sound. Not loud, not sharp, just a light rubbery noise. It came from the living room. I stepped out of the kitchen and looked toward the balcony. The vertical blinds were pulled shut, but a couple were tilted just enough for the porch light to cast a sliver of glow inside. I couldn't see anything outside, but the blinds shifted a little, like maybe a breeze came through. Then I remembered I hadn't opened that door in weeks. The rain was still coming down hard, no way there'd be a breeze strong enough to move them. I stood there for a second, just listening. It got quiet again. The microwave beeped behind me, and I jumped. I told myself it was probably nothing, just wind pushing against the glass. I ate standing up, checking my phone. After a while, I forgot about it. I even turned on a podcast and started getting ready for bed. The bathroom window was cracked open a bit for ventilation, and the rain was louder there, steady thumping on the roof, distant traffic swishing by. I brushed my teeth and came out into the bedroom. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen earlier. On the carpet, just a few steps from the sliding door that leads to the balcony, there were muddy footprints. Just two. One right next to the glass, and one closer to the hallway. They weren't huge, but they were definitely boot prints. Fresh ones. Not dried, not smudged like someone had just stepped in from outside. I froze. The balcony's second story. There's no outside access unless someone climbed the tree or scaled the wall. I hadn't heard anything like that. No clanging, no heavy steps, no screen being removed, nothing. And the lock on the sliding door was still in place. I checked it 3 times. Still latched. But the footprints were real. Wet. They led away from the door, toward the hallway, but not back. Just 2 steps. No return trail. I turned around and scanned the whole room. Nothing was moved. Nothing looked touched. But my chest was tight, like I'd walked in on something I wasn't supposed to see. I checked the bathroom, empty. Kitchen, same. Living room, closet, all fine. I even opened every cabinet, even though I knew that made no sense. Then I stood in the middle of the apartment, thinking, trying to convince myself it was me somehow. Maybe I'd stepped in something and tracked it in. But my shoes were still by the door, bone dry inside, and the prints were way bigger than mine. Wider too. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen. I've never done that before, ever. It felt stupid, walking around my own apartment with a knife. But I couldn't relax. I checked under the bed, inside the hallway closet, behind the shower curtain, all clear. I even opened the little attic panel in the closet, even though I didn't own a ladder and couldn't really see much. I poked a broom up into the space and waved it around. Nothing. But I couldn't stop thinking about the direction of those footprints. Like someone had come in and then disappeared. I pulled the curtain back and looked out through the sliding door. The rain had washed away most of the mud on the balcony, but there were still smudges near the railing. I couldn't tell if they were shoe marks or just dirt, but something had definitely been there. I didn't sleep. I turned on every light and sat on the couch until the sun came up. Around 6, I finally decided to go to the leasing office. I showed the manager the photos I took of the prints, asked if maintenance had been in my unit. She said no one was scheduled and no work orders had been filed. She looked weirded out but didn't seem to know what to do. That afternoon, I bought a door alarm and a cheap security camera, the kind you stick to the wall with tape. I installed both that night. For a few days, nothing happened. I started to feel dumb about the whole thing. Then Thursday rolled around. I got home from work, and right away I knew something was off. The balcony blinds were open. Wide open. I always keep them shut. Not halfway or cracked shut. I stepped inside and just stood there, holding the door open behind me. The light from the hallway spilled in, and I scanned the living room, the kitchen, the little dining table. I walked toward the sliding door slowly, heart pounding. The lock was undone. The door wasn't open, but it was unlocked. I know I locked it that morning. I always do. I backed up, went straight to the bedroom, nothing moved. Checked the bathroom, the closets, still nothing. But it was the blinds that rattled me the most. Someone had touched them. I pulled the camera footage from my phone, thinking maybe I'd finally catch something. But the motion alert hadn't triggered. I forgot I'd only pointed it toward the front door. That night, I didn't sleep again. The next day, I called in sick and used a day off to go buy another camera. This time I installed it in the living room, pointed straight at the balcony. I tested the motion alert, made sure it was recording. That night, it rained again. And around 3 in the morning, I got a notification on my phone, movement detected. I opened the app. The video was short. Just 10 seconds. It showed the balcony empty, and then suddenly, a shadow crossed the glass. The outline of a person. I couldn't see the face, or even the clothes really, just the shape of a man, tall, pausing there. The camera didn't pick up audio, but you could see him lean forward, close to the glass like he was looking in. Then he backed away and disappeared to the left, out of frame. I called the cops. Told them someone had been on my balcony more than once. They came out, looked around, didn't find anything. I showed them the video. One of them shrugged and said it might have just been someone cutting through the lot, trying balconies for an unlocked door. I asked how they got up there. He said maybe the guy climbed the tree. That was it. After that, I moved. Broke my lease. I didn't even care about the penalty. I couldn't stay there another night. I never found out who it was, or how they got in the first time without setting anything off. I kept that video saved on my phone for a while, but eventually deleted it. I didn't want to keep looking at it. Just that shape. Standing there in the rain. Like he was deciding something. It was around 10:30 at night, raining hard. I remember that part clearly because I had just come back from my sister's place and barely made it inside before the sky opened up. I was soaked from the knees down. I threw my shoes on the mat, changed into dry clothes, and was heating up some leftover pasta when the banging started. It was loud. Not like a knock, more like someone using their fist, hitting hard and fast. It made me jump. I thought maybe a branch had hit the door in the wind or something, but then it came again, more desperate this time. I paused the microwave and walked to the door. I live alone, in a small house just off a quiet road. My closest neighbor is about half a block down. The porch light was on, but it only lit the front steps and part of the driveway. I checked the peephole. There was a guy standing there. Soaked. He had one arm pressed to the door, his other hand still balled into a fist. Hoodie drenched and clinging to him. Mud on his jeans. He looked young, maybe early 20s, and panicked. I starting behind him like he was waiting for something to come out of the dark. I didn't open the door. I said through it, "Can I help you?" He leaned his face closer. "Please," he said, breathless. "Please let me in. He's chasing me." Something in the way he said it hit wrong. It was the way he said he, not someone. Like I should already know who. I said, "Who's chasing you?" He looked back over his shoulder. "I don't know." I was walking and he started following me, then running. He had a knife. I lost him a few blocks back, but I think he followed me here. "Please, just for a minute, just let me in." I didn't move. I didn't say anything. My hand was still on the lock, but I wasn't turning it. My gut felt off. Like I was looking at someone acting scared, not actually scared. He glanced behind him again, real quick, then leaned in closer to the door. "He's already inside," he said, so quiet I almost didn't catch it. That's when I stepped back. I locked the deadbolt, then said, louder this time, "I'm calling the police." He didn't react at first. Just stood there, head tilted slightly like he was listening to something. Then, without another word, he turned and walked off the porch. Not running, not even fast. Just walking. I didn't move until he was completely out of view. I closed the curtains and grabbed my phone. No service. I swear I had full bars an hour ago. I walked to the back room, then the kitchen, trying to find signal. Nothing. Just SOS. It was raining hard enough now that it drowned out most background noise, but when I turned everything off, the microwave, the lights, even the fridge hum, I could hear creaking. Like floorboards. At first, I told myself it was just the house. Old wood, rain outside, maybe something shifting. But the sound was steady. One step. Then another. Then nothing. Then another. It was coming from the hallway. I stood by the kitchen counter and grabbed the biggest knife I had. Not because I had some heroic plan, just because it felt like the only thing I could do. I didn't call out. I didn't want to. Something told me not to say a word. I waited a long time. Maybe 10 minutes. Nothing else. Eventually I worked up enough nerve to move. I went down the hallway, real slow. Every room was dark. I flicked lights on one by one: bathroom, guest room, laundry, all empty. Then I checked the attic hatch in the ceiling. It hadn't been disturbed. I never opened my bedroom door. I don't know why. I just didn't. It was closed when I got home, and I hadn't gone in there since. My instinct told me not to touch it. I went back to the kitchen and sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet. I stayed there the rest of the night, knife in hand, lights on. By morning, my phone had service again. I didn't call the cops. I probably should have. But what would I say? That a guy knocked on my door and then walked away? I opened the bedroom door once the sun was up. There was nothing there. Everything was where I left it. Except my closet door was open. I never leave it open. I know I didn't open it that day. Nothing inside was missing. Nothing was out of place. Just the door, wide open. Like someone had been standing behind it, watching through the crack. I was driving back from my cousin's place pretty late. It was one of those nights where the rain doesn't let up for even a second. Windshield wipers were going non-stop, barely doing anything. I remember gripping the wheel tighter than usual, leaning forward like it would help me see better through all the mess. I'd taken the back roads to avoid traffic. Big mistake. About 40 minutes into the drive, I felt the car tug a little to the right. At first, I thought it was just the wind or water pulling in the road, but it kept pulling. I slowed down, turned on my hazards, and rolled to a stop on the gravel shoulder. There were woods on both sides. No streetlights. Just black trees and rain. I got out to check, and sure enough, my front right tire was flat. I didn't hear anything when it happened, no pop or bang. It just went out. I hadn't seen any debris, and I wasn't going fast. I popped the trunk and pulled out the spare and jack. The gravel was soft and wet, so it took me longer than usual. I kept having to wipe water off my face. My hoodie was soaked in 5 minutes. While I was crouched by the tire, I looked up once and thought I saw a light flicker through the trees. Just for a second. Like a porch light. It was hard to tell with how hard the rain was falling, but I stared into the trees for a moment. Nothing else moved. No light again. I finished changing the tire and got back into the car, dripping and cold. I just sat there for a minute, running the heater, trying to dry my hands. That's when I remembered passing a house about half a mile back, the only one I'd seen on that stretch. All its lights had been on, which stuck out because of how dark everything else was. I figured I'd stop and ask to use their hose to wash off my hands or maybe even call someone. My phone had died just before I left. So I turned around and drove slowly back the way I came. It took longer than it should have. The rain was coming in sheets. I finally saw the house again, 2 stories, kind of old looking, sitting just a little off the road behind a low chain link fence. Every single window was glowing yellow. Warm looking, but weirdly bright. I pulled into the gravel drive and parked near the front. No other cars in sight. I waited a second. No movement inside. No curtains drawn. Just a still house glowing in the middle of a thunderstorm. I got out and jogged to the front porch. The rain was loud on the tin awning above. I knocked once, waited. Knocked again, louder. Nothing. Then I rang the doorbell, one of those old ones with a harsh buzz, and pressed my ear toward the door. Through all the rain, I could swear I heard something behind it. Breathing. Not talking, not footsteps. Just the sound of someone standing really still and breathing. I called out, "Hey, I got a flat down the road. Just wondering if I could use your phone real quick." No answer. The breathing didn't stop. It was steady and close, like someone was right on the other side of the door listening. I stepped back, kind of spooked now. I waited another 30 seconds, staring at the door, half expecting it to swing open. But it didn't. I turned to leave and took a step off the porch. That's when I heard it. The breathing stopped. Not faded, stopped, like whoever was doing it had suddenly held their breath. I froze. Waited. Nothing. Just rain and thunder somewhere in the distance. I started walking fast to my car. I didn't run, but I wasn't wasting time either. As I reached the door, I glanced back once at the house. One of the curtains in an upstairs window had moved. It was subtle, like someone had let go of it after peeking through. The curtain swayed slightly, then stilled. I got in and locked the doors. Just sat there, gripping the wheel. The lights inside the house never flickered. Nothing else moved. I didn't wait around. I backed out and got the hell out of there. The next part is what messed with me the most. I'd gone maybe 5 minutes down the road when I saw headlights behind me. I hadn't passed anyone, and the road had no other driveways or side streets that I saw. But there was a car behind me now. I figured maybe whoever was in that house decided to follow me, or maybe they had been gone and just came back. At first, they kept a normal distance. Then, slowly, they started getting closer. I sped up a little. They sped up too. I didn't want to overreact, but I was already on edge, and something about the way they were driving didn't feel right. I changed lanes even though the road was mostly empty. They did the same. I took a random left when I hit an intersection, not even thinking about where it went. They followed. Not fast, not aggressive. Just matching me. It felt like a game of chicken, but with no rush. Like they had all night. After a few more turns, I found a gas station still open and pulled in. As I parked, the car behind me just rolled on past like nothing had happened. Tinted windows. Couldn't see who was inside. No plates, or at least none I could make out in the rain. I went inside the gas station pretending to browse and waited 10 minutes. Told the cashier I thought I was being followed. He just kind of nodded like it happened often. When I came back out, the lot was empty. I drove the rest of the way home on edge, checking my mirrors every few seconds. No one followed me again. The next day, when it stopped raining, I went out to check the flat tire again, just wanted to see what had caused it. There was no nail. No sharp debris. Nothing. Just a clean slice across the sidewall, like it had been done with a knife. I'd stayed late to help cover for a coworker, and I was tired as hell, just thinking about microwaving leftovers and passing out. The kind of rain where the wipers are going full speed and still barely keeping up. Roads were quiet, no one was out unless they had to be. I turned into my neighborhood and started slowing down. It's one of those older suburbs, all the houses look similar and the street lamps are kind of spaced out weird, so there are long patches of darkness between them. I pulled into my driveway and was about to hit the garage opener when I saw it. My front door was wide open. Not like slightly ajar or blown open from wind. I mean completely open, like someone had swung it all the way back. Light was spilling out onto the porch, and I could see the outline of someone standing just inside the doorway, motionless. They were turned away from me, like they were looking further into my house. Not moving. Just standing there, maybe 6 feet inside, in the hallway that leads past the kitchen. I didn't move at first. I just sat there in the car, engine still running, wipers squeaking back and forth. My hands were still on the wheel, but I remember feeling them start to sweat. I didn't recognize the person. They weren't wearing anything distinctive, just a hoodie, jeans. But their posture was off. They stood stiff, with their arms at their sides, like someone waiting to hear instructions. At first, I thought maybe it was a burglar caught in the act. Or worse, someone who was still in the middle of doing something inside. I slowly turned off the engine and killed the lights. I stayed in the car and watched. No movement. Not even a twitch. Whoever it was, they didn't seem to notice or care that a car had just pulled into the driveway. I cracked the window a little so I could listen over the rain. I couldn't hear much, just water hitting the car roof and the faint hum of my fridge from inside the house. Eventually, I pulled out my phone to call 911. No signal. I have spotty reception at home even on good days, and the storm probably made it worse. I didn't want to get out of the car, but I also couldn't just sit there all night. My first thought was to back out quietly and drive to the gas station a few blocks away to make the call. But then I started second-guessing myself. What if the person inside heard me backing up? What if they saw the taillights and ran out? I waited another minute or two, trying to see if the person would move or do anything, but they didn't. Just stood there. I finally decided to open the door as quietly as I could and slip around the side of the house. There's a path along the fence to the backyard that leads to the porch and the back door, which I always keep locked. If I could get a better view through the kitchen window, I could at least see what the hell was going on. The rain hit me hard. Cold and loud. My shoes sank a little into the muddy grass as I crept down the side of the house. Every step I took, I kept looking over my shoulder at the front door, making sure the figure hadn't moved. Still there. Still turned away. Like they were listening to something deeper inside the house. When I got to the back, I ducked under the kitchen window and slowly peeked up through the blinds. The kitchen lights were off, but the hallway was still lit. I could see the back of the person clearly now. They were standing completely still. Not swaying, not shifting weight. I watched for probably 30 seconds straight and didn't see a single movement. That's when I noticed something else. There were wet footprints on the hardwood floor, leading from the front door to where the person was standing and past them. Around the corner, toward the bedrooms. That meant someone else had gone in first. Or at least, the one I was seeing now wasn't alone. I ducked back down and tried calling again. Still nothing. My mind was racing. I thought about trying to get to a neighbor's house, but I didn't want to run out in the open, not knowing who else might be inside. Then, for the first time since I'd gotten home, the person inside moved. Not a lot. Just a tiny step backward. Like they'd heard something behind them. I froze again, heart going crazy. They stood like that for a moment, then slowly, really slowly, turned their head just a little to the right. Not enough to see their face, but enough that I could tell they were looking over their shoulder. And that's when the lights in the hallway shut off. Just like that. Complete darkness inside, except for the faint kitchen light coming from behind me. I stepped back fast, nearly slipped in the mud. I couldn't see anything now, and that felt worse than before. I didn't wait. I ran to the fence, hopped over it even though I banged my shin hard, and sprinted down the street to my neighbor's place, soaking wet and gasping. I rang their bell over and over until they answered. Their porch light clicked on and I started yelling immediately, asking them to call the cops. Cops showed up within 10 minutes. I stood on the porch while they went in with flashlights. They were inside for a while. Eventually, one of them came out and asked if I was sure I'd seen someone. I told them yes, absolutely. They said they found the door open, just like I said. Found footprints too, leading in from the porch and down the hallway, but no one else. No sign of forced entry. Nothing missing. No one hiding inside. They checked the whole place, top to bottom. They said it might have been someone confused, maybe under the influence, maybe just looking for shelter from the storm. One of the officers suggested I might have imagined how long they stood still because I was scared and tired. But I know what I saw. I watched that person stand there for 5 straight minutes. And I know I saw those footprints leading further into the house. There was more than one person. After the cops left, I went inside. Locked every door and window. Sat on the couch for a long time with a knife in my lap and all the lights on. Didn't sleep until the sun came up. Next morning, I found something else. My bedroom closet door, which I always leave open, was shut. I was driving back from my sister's place on a Thursday night. It was close to midnight, and the rain had been coming down in sheets since earlier that evening. The kind where your headlights just kind of blur into a wall of gray and you have to lean forward, squinting, like that'll help somehow. I don't love driving at night, but my sister had just gotten out of the hospital after a minor surgery, and I stayed late to help her settle in. The streets were mostly empty. I remember passing one gas station that was still open and a closed diner with the neon sign half lit. My wipers were going at full speed, and even then, visibility was garbage. I kept the music low, just a faint hum to break up the sound of the rain. I hit a red light at this weird five-way intersection about 10 minutes from my apartment. It's not in the nicest part of town, but not the worst either, just kind of forgotten. Empty lots, old houses with boarded-up windows, a few flickering streetlights that barely lit the road. I rolled to a stop behind the white line, watching the rain bead and trail down the windshield. That's when I saw him. Out of the corner of my eye, through the passenger side, I noticed someone crossing the street diagonally. A man, probably mid-30s, soaking wet, walking slowly like he didn't care how drenched he was. He wasn't running for cover, just moving at this steady, casual pace. No umbrella, no hood up, hands in his pockets. His clothes looked dark, maybe a hoodie and jeans. He crossed in front of my car, never once looking my way, and stepped up onto the sidewalk just past the light. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured maybe he lived nearby or was just out of it, drunk maybe. But then, he turned. He stepped off the curb again, walked straight toward my back passenger side door, and tried the handle. Just like that. No hesitation. Like he knew me. Or like he was getting into a cab. It was locked, thankfully. I hadn't even seen him approach until he was already there. I jumped a little, instinctively reaching over to double-check the lock, even though I knew I'd hit it when I got in the car earlier. He pulled on the handle twice, slow and deliberate. Then he just stopped. He stood there, inches from the window, staring through the glass. I don't know how to describe his expression because there wasn't one. His face was blank, not angry or smiling, just watching me. Like he was trying to figure something out. He looked completely calm. His face was pale and wet, water dripping from his chin, plastering his hair to his forehead. His eyes didn't blink, just fixed right on mine. I didn't move. I didn't want to give him anything, no reaction, no sign I was panicking. But my heart was going crazy in my chest. I glanced at the light. Still red. No cars around. Just me, him, and the rain hammering the roof of the car. I thought about backing up, but I was already too close to the intersection, and there was a concrete median behind me. No way to get around without doing some weird maneuver, and I didn't want to give him a chance to try anything with the doors if I moved. I remember thinking, don't unlock anything by mistake. Keep your hand off the controls. Just wait. He stood there for maybe 20 seconds. Could have been more, could have been less. It felt longer. Then, without a word, he backed away. 2 steps, then he turned and started walking down the sidewalk again, like nothing had happened. I waited until he was at least a half block down before I looked up at the light again. It was still red. I didn't care anymore. I checked for traffic and ran it. I didn't speed off, didn't want to attract attention, just drove a few blocks further and pulled into a well-lit gas station to calm down. I sat there for a while, breathing hard, trying to convince myself it wasn't that weird. Maybe he was high. Maybe he thought I was someone else. It was raining. People do strange stuff. But that wasn't it. When I pulled into my building's parking garage about 10 minutes later, I parked in my usual spot and just sat there for a minute again. My heart had slowed down, but I was still jittery. I remember glancing in the rearview mirror just to reassure myself. And that's when I saw it. There was a handprint on the outside of the back window, right where he had been standing. Perfectly shaped, smeared slightly downward, like he'd leaned in hard. I hadn't heard him do that. I hadn't seen his hand on the glass. But it was there. I got out of the car quickly and walked around to check. No one in the garage. All the other spots were empty. I wiped the print off with my sleeve and got inside as fast as I could, locking the door behind me. The hallway in my building is always dead quiet at night, and I couldn't stop glancing behind me as I went up the stairs. I lived on the 3rd floor. Didn't take the elevator. Too paranoid. Once I got into my apartment, I deadbolt the door and checked the peephole even though I'd literally just locked it seconds earlier. Then I checked every room, even under the bed and in the closets, like I was 10 years old again. Obviously no one was there. I didn't sleep much. I kept getting up to check the front door, listening for footsteps in the hall. At one point, maybe around 2 a.m., I thought I heard the elevator ding, but when I peeked through the peephole, nothing. I never saw the guy again. But for about a week afterward, every time I got in the car, I checked the back seat. I started avoiding red lights when I could. And I never park at that intersection anymore, even in daylight. It was a Friday night, raining hard. The kind of steady, heavy rain that makes everything feel slower. I wasn't planning to go out anyway, so I just figured I'd order some food and watch something dumb until I passed out. I used one of the usual apps. It said my order would be delivered by a guy named Alan, little circular photo, buzz cut, kind of heavy set. Nothing weird. Said he was 10 minutes away. I watched his little car icon creep through the streets while I kept half an eye on a show playing in the background. At some point, the app pinged, "Alan is arriving now." I muted the TV and walked toward the door. I live alone in a one-bedroom place, ground floor, with a short walkway to the street. No gate or anything. My front door has a window right next to it, the narrow vertical kind with blinds you can peek through. I opened the blinds just a little, enough to see someone coming up the walkway, but it wasn't the guy from the app. This guy was tall and lanky. Hoodie pulled up over his head, jeans dark with rain. No delivery bag, just a plastic grocery bag in one hand, like the kind you'd get at a gas station. I watched him approach, thinking maybe he was just someone passing through. Then he stepped right up to my door and stood there. I didn't open it. I called out, "Yeah." He didn't answer right away. Just kind of stood with his head down, but still on. Then he said, "Food delivery." His voice was quiet. Flat. I paused, then asked, "From where?" He mumbled something that sounded about right, the place I ordered from, but he said it weird, like he wasn't sure how to pronounce it. I kept the door locked and said, "The app said Alan was coming." He finally looked up. His face was thin, kind of gaunt. Maybe mid-30s. I remember his eyes really wide, not blinking much. He said, "Yeah. Alan couldn't make it. I'm helping him out." There was no explanation beyond that. Just that sentence. I still hadn't opened the door. I said, "Why didn't the app update?" He gave this slight shrug, like it wasn't his problem. "I don't know. Maybe it glitched." The bag he was holding looked too small. Like maybe it had a single item in it. I'd ordered for 2 burger, fries, drink, the whole combo. This looked like a bag you carry chips in. Something about the whole thing made my stomach tighten. I've had weird delivery stuff before, missing items, wrong address, but not like this. I told him, hold on a second, and backed away from the door. He immediately said, louder, hey, it's your food, man. I didn't respond. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and opened the app again. Alan was still showing as arriving. No change. No mention of anyone else delivering. I texted through the support chat asking if something had changed. I walked back to the door and peeked again through the blinds. He was still there. But now he was turned, looking directly at the window, like he knew I was going to be watching. He smiled. Just barely. Not like he was being friendly, more like he was amused. I let the blinds fall shut and stepped back. Then I heard it. Not a knock, a slow drag. Like he was running his nails across the door. It lasted 3 or 4 seconds, then stopped. I stood there frozen, phone in hand. No update from the app. Nothing. Then a loud knock, fast and hard. Made me jump. He shouted, come on, man. It's your food. I didn't answer. I backed into my living room, lights still off, just a low glow from the kitchen and the TV still muted. The knock came again, this time even harder. Then silence. I waited maybe a full minute before I peeked again. He was gone. No sound of footsteps, nothing. Just rain hitting the windows and the distant noise of a car passing once in a while. I crept back to the door, unlocked it, and opened it an inch, chain still on. Looked outside. Nobody. Not on the walkway. Not near the street. Then I looked down. The bag was sitting on my doormat. Soaked. I didn't touch it. Closed and locked the door again, heart still racing. I stood there for a long time, just listening. Nothing. Eventually I went around the apartment and checked all the windows. Everything locked. Curtains closed. No sign of him. The support chat finally replied about 15 minutes later. They said the order was still in progress, that Alan was running late due to weather. I canceled it. I didn't even explain, just canceled it and said I'd deal with it later. I didn't sleep much. Left the hallway light on, sat on the couch, and kept the TV running. Every now and then I thought I heard something outside, a footstep, maybe, but I never saw anything else. The next morning, the bag was gone. Just a damp outline left on the doormat, like it had sat there for a while. I called the restaurant that day, just out of curiosity, to ask if they'd send someone else. They said no, they only use in-app drivers. Said the guy I got assigned, Alan, was legit and that he'd marked my order undeliverable when no one answered the door. Which means there wasn't anyone connected to the app. Someone else came to my door in the middle of a storm, with a random bag, pretending to be my delivery guy. And he knew my name. The order had my name on it. He called me by it when he yelled through the door the second time. I didn't say that earlier. But yeah, he knew it. I was walking home from a late shift. I worked the closing shift at a liquor store about 15 minutes from my apartment. I usually drive, but my car had been acting up, so I decided to walk. I'd done it before. It's not the safest neighborhood, but it's not the worst either. Mostly just quiet and kind of dead after 9 p.m. It had started raining maybe 20 minutes before I left. Not pouring, but steady. Enough to make the street shine under the few streetlights that were actually working. I had my hood up, hands in my jacket pockets, head down. It wasn't cold, just damp, and the rain made this soft hiss everywhere. The kind that fills your ears but doesn't drown everything out. I was about 3 blocks from the store when I first heard footsteps behind me. I didn't think much of it at first. This street connects a few apartment complexes and a gas station, so sometimes people cut through. But after maybe 10, 15 steps, I noticed something that made me slow down. The steps behind me slowed too. Perfectly. I stopped for a second at the corner where there's a broken streetlight, pretending to check my phone. The steps stopped too. I glanced behind me. Nobody. The sidewalk stretched back under a few dim orange lamps. A parked car, a puddle spreading into the street. No one in sight. Maybe I imagined it. Or maybe the person turned off somewhere. I waited another beat, still pretending to scroll, then kept walking. About 10 steps later, splash, splash, behind me again. Exactly in sync with mine. I slowed down. They slowed. I sped up a little. They sped up. Still no talking. No sound except shoes hitting wet concrete, copying mine. I didn't want to turn around again. Something about doing that, it felt like it would confirm something I didn't want to deal with. I thought maybe it was just someone messing around, being weird, or some kid walking the same way. But the way they matched me step for step, like they were deliberately staying just out of view, it started making my chest feel tight. I crossed the street at the next intersection without even looking for cars. Just jaywalked across, hoping they'd keep going straight if they were behind me. Once I got to the other side, I walked fast. Not quite running, but close. Then, splash, from across the street, the sound followed. Still matching me. I finally turned. Again, nothing. But I knew I wasn't crazy. The splashing was too close, too exact. Even the way it paused when I paused, sped up when I sped up, it felt too deliberate. Like they were doing it on purpose, just to screw with me. I tried to think of who would do that. I don't really know my neighbors. No friends nearby. No exes. No one I could think of who'd go that far just to mess with me. I pulled my phone out and pretended to make a call, hoping whoever it was would back off. I said something out loud like, "Yeah, I'm almost home. You're outside already?" Cool. Dumb, I know, but it made me feel a little better. I didn't hear anything after that for about a block. Just my own steps and the rain again. I was almost starting to think maybe they were gone. I turned down the smaller street that leads to my apartment complex. It's quieter there, just a few duplexes and fenced yards, most of them dark. One porch light flickering. Nobody out. Then, splash. Behind me again. I kept walking, faster this time. I wanted to run but didn't want to make it obvious I was scared. My place was just ahead, second building on the left. I reached into my pocket for my keys, fingers fumbling to pull them out. The steps behind me stopped. I looked up, my apartment gate was closed. It usually creaks when you open it. I pushed through, didn't bother closing it behind me. My front door was 10 feet away. Then I heard it again. The gate creak. Real slow. Whoever was behind me, they followed me in. I didn't look. I shoved my key in the lock, got it open, and slammed the door shut behind me. Locked it. Deadbolt 2. My heart was thudding in my chest so loud I could barely hear anything. I turned off the lights, crouched by the peephole, and looked through. I don't know what I expected, someone running away, maybe, or standing right there. But no one was on the porch. I waited a full minute, not breathing much, still staring. Nothing. Eventually I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and grabbed the knife I use for cooking. I wasn't planning to use it, I just felt better holding it. I walked through the place, double-checked every window, even the tiny bathroom one. All locked. Curtains drawn. I went back to the door and checked again through the peephole. Still empty. Then something moved in the corner of my eye through the side window next to the door. I turned just enough to catch a blur. I ducked down, back to the wall. My phone was on the couch. I hadn't brought it with me. I crawled over, trying not to make noise, grabbed it, and called 911. While I was waiting, I peeked again through the side window, lifting one slat of the blinds with my pinky. Someone was standing at the edge of the porch, right outside the gate. Too far to see clearly, but close enough to tell they were tall, wearing something dark. Just standing there. Perfectly still. No umbrella. No motion. I whispered to the operator, told her everything. She said they'd send a unit right away. The person didn't move. A minute passed. Still there. Then a slow step forward. Another one. They stopped right in front of my door, leaned forward like they were listening. Then I heard them speak. They said, quiet, almost like they were talking to themselves, "You're fast." My throat went dry. I didn't respond. I couldn't. They stayed there, breathing heavy, maybe 10 seconds. Then turned and walked off. No rush. Just turned and went back through the gate, out into the rain. Cops came 10 minutes later. I explained everything, as calm as I could. They checked around the complex, didn't find anyone. Said the rain probably washed away any prints. Filed a report and told me to call if anything else happened. That was it. Never saw him again. But every time I walk now, even in daylight, I catch myself listening. Just in case there's a second set of steps following mine. I pulled into the 24-hour station just after midnight. Rain was coming down hard, the kind that drummed on the roof so loud I could barely hear the neon sign buzz. I'd been on the road for hours, running from a long shift out of town. I needed coffee and a break, so I parked under the canopy, killed the engine, and sat for a minute, staring at the windscreen as the wipers slid back and forth. Inside, it was warm and fluorescent. The shelves were half empty, mostly chips and energy drinks. A guy in a hooded sweatshirt stood by the door, dripping water onto the tile. He glanced at me once, then back at the pumps, like he was waiting for someone. I got in line behind him for coffee. He jumped forward when the clerk handed him his drink, said, "Thanks," louder than needed. He carried it with both hands, like it was fragile, and just stood there by the slushy machine. I realized he was the only other customer in the whole place. I picked up my coffee and asked him, "You okay?" Rain was pouring in through the open door, mixing with drips from his sleeves. He looked at me, hesitated, then said, "Yeah. Could use a ride, though. Out of gas." I asked. He shook his head. Something else. He paused, like he was checking me out. "I need to get to Montrose Road. Can you take me?" I pulled off my hood. Montrose? That's not exactly on my way. It's like 20 miles off. He sipped his coffee and smiled faintly. "I'll pay you. $20. He showed me a wrinkled 20 in his palm. Wet from the rain. I thought about it. It was late. And who knows, maybe he really was stuck. I nodded. Sure. Which way is Montrose? He finished the coffee in one gulp and set the cup on the counter. You head south on Highway 12, take a right at Pine Creek, stay on that for about 10 miles, then a left at Old Mill Road. Keep going till you see the barns. Mine's the red one, second on the right. He sounded casual. Friendly, even. I grabbed my keys. Pine Creek turnoff's back the way I came. I glanced at the lonely road outside. You don't want to wait here? He shook his head, eyes on the door. I can't. He didn't explain. He just pushed past me, out into the rain. I followed. We got in my car. I kept the heater on high. He didn't say much at first, just stared out the side window, dripping water onto the seat. After a minute I said, "So why can't you wait here?" He shrugged. Long story. His voice was even, nothing in it. But something in the way he said long story made me feel uneasy. The first few miles were normal. I turned onto Highway 12, rain streaming down the glass. We passed a gas station, closed and dark. I watched him in the mirror, no relief in his face, just that same blank look. I gave the turn okay for Pine Creek. He said, "That's the one." I took it, and we drove under low branches into thick woods. Only one lane each way, no lights, just our headlights cutting through the rain. I tried to make small talk. "Storm's rough tonight." He didn't answer. I said, "Nice night for a drive." Nothing. Every so often I'd look over. He'd be staring straight ahead, like someone in the front seat of a cab. After a bit, I saw the Old Mill Road sign. I turned. No barns in sight, just more trees and a single farmhouse with one light on. I said, "You sure this is the right?" He interrupted. "Keep going. You'll see a cluster of buildings." I kept driving. The rain got heavier. My wipers sounded like they were going to break. About 10 minutes in, I started noticing tire tracks in the mud beside the road. They looked fresh, like someone else had been driving the same direction recently. I pointed them out. He said, "They're not mine." I said, "Maybe someone left the gate open or something." He nodded, but still didn't speak. We passed a set of old barns, one red, one white, one falling apart. He said, "Second on the right." I turned into a muddy lane that led down between two more barns. The red one on the right was glowing faintly from an old bulb. I parked by the fence post. He unbuckled, slid the door open, and stepped out into the rain. He didn't even look back. I watched him walk toward the red barn, barely visible in the darkness. He disappeared into the shadow just as I closed the door. Then I noticed the mud dripping off his shoes all over the passenger floor. I leaned forward to wipe it off with a rag from the glove box. When I straightened up, I saw something under the driver's seat, my phone. I hadn't dropped it, but somehow it ended up there. I picked it up, heart pounding, and saw missed calls from my roommate. I dialed back. He answered on the first ring, sounding panicked. "Dude, where are you? I've been trying to call you for 20 minutes. I said, "I'm at Montrose, by some barns." What's wrong?" He yelled, "Police just called. They found a guy beaten up under a bridge on Old Mill Road. They think he was calling for help from the road when they heard his phone ringing. He gave your number. He doesn't know who picked him up." My mouth went dry. "What?" "That's not me." He said, "They said he got in a car at the Pine Creek turnoff and told them your address. They're asking if you gave him a ride." I dropped the phone, hands shaking. I pictured the motionless man in my passenger seat, those empty eyes. It clicked. I shouted, "That's not me." I turned down the road. I dropped him off at the barns. My roommate said, "Don't go back there. The cops think that barn area is connected to a missing persons case. They want you to stay where you are. They're sending someone." I looked out. No one was walking back up the lane. Just empty mud and rain. I grabbed my keys, shoved the phone in my pocket, and started the car. I backed out onto Old Mill Road and floored it. Tires spun in the mud, spraying dirt. I didn't stop until I hit the highway. 2 patrol cars met me, lights flashing but no sirens. I pulled over. They got out, guns drawn at first, then lowered them when I said my name. I pointed in the direction I'd come. They told me the man found under the bridge was dead. Robbed, beaten, left in the rain. His phone was next to him, showing my number as the last dialed. People knocked on my windows, asking questions. I said I dropped someone at the barns. They said there's no record of a house there, no barns on any map. The whole area is just old farmland, no residences. The red barn I saw wasn't listed in county records. They didn't know who owned it. I answered every question, voice shaking. They ran my license, checked my car. Nothing else linked me to the crime except that phone number. They told me to go home. They'd call if they needed more. I nodded. Back in my apartment, I called the ride app and canceled my next shift. I didn't sleep. When the rain started again that night, I sat by the window, listening. No footsteps on the wet pavement. No one walking by asking for a ride. The next day I drove out with friends to find that red barn. We got lost in the mud, couldn't find anything. No barns stood where I remembered. Just empty fields and a sagging fence. I never got paid the $20. And I deleted my number from the guy's phone when they gave it back. I don't know where that address led him, but I know it wasn't home. Nobody does. And I didn't stay to find out. It was a night like any other, honestly. I had just gotten back from running some errands, and it was coming down hard, rain hammering against the windows, the kind of downpour that made you wonder if the whole street would flood by morning. I had no plans, just a quiet evening in front of the TV with some takeout. I don't mind storms, honestly. It's kind of cozy, being inside while everything outside is chaotic. So, I'm sitting there, scrolling through my phone when I hear it. Knocking. At first, I didn't think much of it. The wind was gusting pretty badly, so I figured it was just the storm messing with things. But then it came again, knock, 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 louder this time, more deliberate. My first thought was that it might be a neighbor, but I didn't expect anyone to be out in this mess. It was already past 9 p.m., and the only people I knew who lived nearby were either older folks or people with little kids, and they didn't tend to pop by unannounced. I stood up from the couch and went to the door. Through the peephole, I saw nothing at first, just a dark, rain-slicked porch. But then, just as I was about to pull away, I saw a small figure standing on the doorstep. A kid. I hesitated for a second, then opened the door, just a crack, not enough to let anyone in. I could see him better now, a little boy, probably no older than 10 or so, drenched from head to toe. His clothes were sticking to him, his hair a mess of wet strands clinging to his forehead. He didn't say anything, just stood there staring at me with wide, almost two-eyed eyes. I blinked. "Hey, are you okay?" He didn't respond, just kept looking at me, his eyes locked onto mine. It was strange. I could hear the rain pounding against the roof, but there was no other sound, nothing from the kid, no shuffling or breathing, nothing. "Do you need help?" I asked, still feeling uneasy. "Are you lost?" At that, he finally blinked, but his gaze didn't waver. There was something unsettling about the way he was looking at me, like he wasn't really seeing me, like I was just some background noise. I shifted my weight, trying to shake the weird tension in the air. I was about to ask again if he was all right when something caught my eye. Across the street, by the lamppost at the corner, stood a man. He was just standing there, watching us. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, and his face was mostly obscured by the shadows, but I could see his eyes. He was staring directly at me. I didn't know how long he'd been there, but it felt like an eternity. I didn't like the way he was standing so still, just watching. It felt wrong. My stomach churned, and suddenly, the whole situation felt a little too off. My attention snapped back to the boy. I tried to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the anxiety creeping up. "Hey, is everything okay?" I asked again, trying to reassure myself more than anything. "Where's your mom or dad?" The boy didn't answer, but his eyes flicked toward the man across the street. It was subtle, but I caught it. That small, quick movement. Then, just as quickly, his gaze snapped back to mine. I couldn't tell if he was scared or just unfazed. It was like he wasn't fully present. I took a step back. "You're soaked through. You should come inside, get warm. I'll call your parents." But the boy didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on me, and his silence grew heavier. I felt like I couldn't breathe for a second. I looked back at the man. He hadn't moved. In fact, he was just standing there, his head slightly tilted, his gaze still locked on me. That's when I noticed the way he was holding himself. His arms were at his sides, relaxed but in a way that didn't look normal. Like he wasn't waiting for something. He wasn't even waiting for the rain to let up. I knew I had to do something, but what? I didn't want to just slam the door on the kid. He was just a child, after all. But that man across the street, he didn't feel right. He looked like a predator, lurking in plain sight. "Come on," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, trying to convince myself as much as the kid. "Let's get you inside. We'll figure this out." Finally, the boy took a step forward. But as he did, I felt the air around me get thicker, heavier. Something was wrong. The boy's face didn't show relief, or even a trace of gratitude. He was still expressionless. He didn't speak. He just moved closer, slowly, like he was being pulled by some invisible string. And then I heard it. A soft scrape, like shoes shifting against the concrete. I turned sharply. The man was moving now, slowly, stepping off the curb, but his steps were oddly smooth, calculated, like he had all the time in the world. And his eyes, they were still locked on me. No, not on me. On the boy. "Get inside, now," I said, voice cracking as I slammed the door shut. The boy didn't react. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, staring at the door, not looking at me anymore, but looking at the space where I had just been. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was waiting, not for me, but for something else. I locked the door and stepped back, heart pounding. Through the peephole, I could see the boy still standing there, unmoving, his back to the rain now, staring at the door. The man across the street had stopped moving too, but now I could see that his hands were in his pockets, and his head was tilted in that same odd way, almost as if he was waiting for something to happen. I don't know how long I stood there, watching them through the peephole, my breath getting heavier, my hands trembling. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, the boy turned, slowly, and walked away. The man didn't follow, didn't move. The boy just walked into the storm, vanishing into the rain-soaked night. I didn't wait to see if he came back, didn't want to stick around for another moment. I went straight for my phone, locked all the doors, and called the police. They took my statement, said they'd checked the area. I told them everything, including the man across the street, but when they came by, they said there was no one around and no sign of the boy. I don't know what happened, but I haven't seen the boy or that man again. The storm passed, and everything seemed normal again, but something inside me stayed on edge. There was something wrong with the way the kid acted, and something off about that man. I didn't know what they wanted or why they were there, but I knew it wasn't good. I don't know if it was a coincidence or something more, but I haven't opened the door to a stranger since. I don't really know where to start with this, but I guess the first thing is, I've always thought I'd be okay in scary situations. I don't scare easy. I mean, I've watched all the horror movies, read all the thrillers. But this, what happened that night, I can't explain it. I don't even want to. It was a stormy evening, the kind where the rain feels like it's trying to drown everything. I was home alone, just curled up on the couch with some takeout and a movie. The power kept flickering, and the wind was so loud against the windows that it almost drowned out the movie. The kind of storm where you're just glad to be indoors. Around 10 p.m., my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was a wrong number or something, and I was about to ignore it when it stopped ringing and immediately started again. I picked it up. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound casual, but the static on the other end made my throat tighten. For a second, there was just silence. Then a voice, low and cold, came through. "Look out the window." My heart dropped. I froze, phone still pressed to my ear. It wasn't a wrong number. It wasn't a prank either. There was something in that voice. It wasn't just the fact that it was a strange request, but the way it was said, it sounded like whoever was on the other end knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't asking me to look out the window like someone would if they were, I don't know, trying to get a peek at what I was doing. No, this felt different. It felt like a command. Like they were expecting me to do it. I glanced toward the window. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely see the street. But then, as if on cue, there was a flash of lightning. The light cut through the dark, and for that brief moment, I saw something. Someone. Standing at the edge of my yard. I could barely make them out, but I could see enough. A figure. Tall, maybe too tall. The rain was coming down so heavily that it was hard to tell, but their silhouette was clear. They were just standing there, facing the house, unmoving. Watching. My heart slammed against my chest, and my hand shook as I held the phone tighter. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to give whoever it was the satisfaction of knowing I saw them. But the voice came through again, almost like it was taunting me. "You see them?" the voice asked, and I could feel the smile behind the words, even though I couldn't see their face. I didn't know what to say. "Who are you?" I managed to stammer, but the only response was the sound of the phone line cutting out for a second, like the person was moving or turning away. I could hear the faintest rustling on the other end, but the voice didn't answer. The figure didn't move either. They just stayed there at the edge of the yard. I was too scared to go closer to the window, but at the same time, I couldn't look away. I felt like I was trapped in a staring contest with whoever or whatever that was. The next few minutes were excruciating. The rain pounded against the roof, and every now and then there was another flash of lightning illuminating the yard outside. But the figure never moved. They just stood there, unmoving, for what felt like forever. I kept my eyes on them, and I know it sounds crazy, but I swear the longer I stared, the more it felt like they were getting closer, even though they weren't. The space between them and the window seemed to shrink every time the lightning flashed. I thought about calling the cops. I really did. But what would I tell them? That I saw someone standing in my yard during a storm? That they hadn't done anything but stand there? They'd think I was overreacting. I'd probably end up sounding like a fool. Then, my phone buzzed again. It was the same unknown number. I didn't pick it up this time. I just stared at the screen, trying to calm my breathing. The rain outside was deafening now, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. The tension was unbearable. I felt like I was suffocating, like someone had wrapped a tight band around my chest. I glanced over at the window again. The figure was still there. But now I noticed something else. There was a second figure. A different shape, farther back, just barely visible in the shadows by the fence. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it or if the lightning had made it clearer, but there was definitely someone else out there. And they were facing the first person. Watching them too. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should call the cops or stay hidden. If I ran to the door, would I be safe? If I called the police, would they get here in time? Before I could even think of an answer, I heard the front door creak open. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The door wasn't completely open, but it was just enough that I could hear the slight groan of the hinges. I didn't know how to explain it, but that sound, that made everything real. That made the fear hit like a wave. Someone had gotten inside. I didn't know who or how, but I wasn't alone anymore. I ran to the door, not thinking. The phone was still in my hand, the call still connected, but I couldn't focus on it anymore. My heart was pounding in my ears. My hands were slick with sweat. I grabbed the doorknob and slammed it shut, bolting the deadbolt as fast as I could. I backed away, breathing heavily, staring at the door like it might burst open at any second. The phone line was still open, and I could hear the faintest sound on the other end, like a sigh. And then, a voice again, but this time it was different. It was closer. It was quieter, almost like it was inside my house. "You shouldn't have done that," the voice said. Then the line went dead. I didn't move for what felt like forever. I don't know why, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the door. I was waiting, listening for anything. Any sound. I don't even know how long I stood there, but after a while, I heard the rain start to calm down. It wasn't as heavy, and the flashes of lightning were less frequent. The air felt slightly less suffocating. I checked the window again, and the figures were gone. Just like that. Vanished. There was no one at the edge of my yard anymore. Nothing. It was like they had never been there. I never did find out who it was. I never got an explanation. I didn't even want to know, honestly. I haven't been able to shake the feeling, though, that someone's been watching me. It's been months, and I still check the locks every night, still pull the blinds before bed. I don't think I'll ever really feel safe in my own house again. It was one of those nights when the rain wouldn't let up, and the streets were almost completely empty. I was waiting for the bus, trying to stay dry under the overhang of a small convenience store. The kind of downpour that soaks you to the bone even if you're only out there for a few minutes. I had a jacket, but it wasn't really doing much against the rain. I didn't really mind, though. I was just glad I wasn't standing out in the open, getting drenched. There wasn't anyone else around. The streetlights cast a dull yellow glow, and the world outside the overhang was like a blurred mess of rain and light. I pulled my collar up higher, tucking my jacket tighter, and kept my head down, scrolling through my phone to pass the time. After a few minutes, I noticed someone had joined me under the overhang. I didn't look up at first. It wasn't unusual for people to try and take shelter from the rain, especially since the bus stop was just across the street. But when I did glance over, I saw it was a man, probably in his late 30s or early 40s. He was standing completely still, like he was waiting for something or someone. At first, I thought maybe he was just another person waiting for the bus, but there was something off about him. He didn't have an umbrella. No raincoat. No bag. Nothing. Just a plain t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers, completely soaked through. I don't know why, but it stood out. Everyone I'd seen out in the rain so far had some sort of rain gear. But this guy? Nothing. And he didn't seem bothered by it at all. He was standing next to me, but he wasn't looking at the street or at the bus stop. His eyes were fixed on me. He wasn't looking in my direction. He was looking right at me. I shifted a little, trying to ignore him, but my unease grew. I mean, who just stands that close to a stranger in the rain without saying anything? I glanced up again. He was still staring at me, no expression on his face. Just staring. I shifted again, glancing toward the street, hoping the bus would show up soon. The quiet was starting to feel heavier, like the world around us was shrinking. I pulled my phone out again, pretending to check the time, but I could feel his eyes on me. I don't know why I didn't just leave. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe it was the rain, maybe it was the fact that the bus should have been coming any minute, or maybe I was too confused to move. But the longer I stood there, the more I felt like I couldn't look away. Every time I checked, he was still staring. No blink. No movement. Just staring. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe he was waiting for someone else. Maybe he was tired or lost in his own head. But the longer he stood there, the more I felt like something was wrong. It wasn't just the way he was staring, it was that he wasn't reacting to anything. He wasn't bothered by the rain, he wasn't looking at the cars passing by. It was as if he had zero awareness of the world around him, except for me. The air started to feel heavier, like it was thickening, and the rain seemed to drown out all the other noises. The sounds of cars and the occasional pedestrian disappeared. All I could hear was the rain and the soft shuffle of his feet against the pavement as he shifted slightly. I was starting to panic, though I didn't know exactly why. Maybe it was because the bus was late, maybe because of how still and unnervingly calm he was. My heart rate had picked up, but I kept telling myself it was just a coincidence. People stare all the time, right? Then the man took a step closer. Just one step, but it was enough to make my breath catch in my throat. He hadn't moved at all in the past 10 minutes, and now he was moving toward me? I wanted to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The overhang didn't cover much of the sidewalk, and the street was too busy with traffic for me to cross. So I just stood there, trying to act normal, trying to not look too obvious as I started glancing around for help. I saw a car drive by, headlights shining through the downpour. It gave me a flash of comfort, like I wasn't completely alone. But as soon as it passed, I looked back at the man. He was closer now. Not too close, maybe just a couple of feet away, but it felt like an eternity. I could smell the rain on his clothes, wet cotton clinging to his body. He didn't seem to care at all. He didn't seem cold. He didn't seem anything. He was just staring. It was like I couldn't escape his gaze. I couldn't think clearly. I needed to leave, but I couldn't. For some reason, I felt stuck. I wanted to yell at him, ask what his problem was, but I couldn't find the words. Something told me that if I broke the silence, things might go even more wrong. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped back, just enough to get away from him. The movement seemed to catch his attention, and he took a half step forward, mirroring my movement. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I kept my face neutral, like I wasn't freaking out inside, and I looked around again for anyone nearby. That's when the bus finally pulled up. I don't know why, but I wasn't relieved. I don't know why I felt like running onto it would make it worse. But I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait for the doors to open. I just walked as fast as I could, straight toward the bus. The doors opened, and I climbed on, looking back only once. The man was still there. Staring. Not moving. Not reacting. Like he had been standing there for hours. I sat down in the nearest seat, breathing hard, trying to ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. The bus started moving, and I couldn't help but watch the man in the rearview mirror. I could see his figure shrinking as we turned the corner, but something told me he wasn't going to disappear that easily. I don't know what he wanted, but I know he wasn't there by accident. And I'm still not sure why, after all that time standing there, in the rain, he just never spoke. Never moved. Never broke that stare. That night, when I got home, I checked my locks 3 times before going to bed. And even though I didn't hear or see anything else, I couldn't shake the thought that the man was still out there somewhere, watching. It was a rainy night, the kind where the downpour seemed endless, and the streets were nearly empty. I got home a little later than usual, around 11:30 p.m. The streets were slick with water, the hum of my car's tires drowned out by the relentless rain. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't think much of it. It had been a long day, and all I wanted to do was get inside, dry off, and go to bed. I grabbed my stuff from the passenger seat, made sure the car was locked, and headed up to the front door. The rain kept coming down hard, my shoes making soft squelching noises as I walked up the path. I tried to hurry, knowing I'd be soaked to the bone if I didn't. When I got to the door, I noticed nothing unusual at first. It was still locked, just like I left it. I fumbled around with my keys, the rainwater running off my hood and dripping down my back. Finally, I got the door open, stepped inside, and quickly shut it behind me. I felt a little relief as the warmth from the inside hit me, but it wasn't long before that feeling faded. I put my stuff down and kicked off my shoes, but then I noticed something odd. The bathroom door, which is usually closed and locked, was wide open. I always keep it closed because, well, it's just one of those little habits, you know? I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I forgot to close it earlier or something, but I had a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that told me to check anyway. I walked into the hallway toward the bathroom, and as I did, I felt a small shiver creep down my spine. The whole house was quiet, except for the sound of rain hitting the windows. Everything felt normal, but somehow not quite right. When I reached the bathroom door, I stopped. There, hanging on the bathroom door, was a wet coat. It was a dark jacket, not mine, and it was dripping water onto the floor, leaving a small puddle. For a second, I thought I was imagining things. I stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of it. I didn't know whose coat it was. I didn't know how it got there. I had been out all evening, so I hadn't let anyone into the house, and I certainly hadn't left a coat in the bathroom. I walked over slowly, my feet quiet against the hardwood. My mind raced, trying to come up with an explanation, but none made sense. The coat was too wet for me to have left it there earlier. And the weirdest thing? I didn't hear anyone come in. The front door was still locked when I arrived. I had been inside by myself for the past 15 minutes, so how did this coat get here? I reached out and grabbed the coat, my fingers brushing against the cold, damp fabric. I pulled it off the hook and held it in front of me, trying to figure out if it belonged to someone I knew. There was no name or tag. It was just there. The house was still eerily quiet. I kept glancing over my shoulder as if expecting someone to be standing behind me. I told myself I was just being paranoid, but the longer I stared at that coat, the more uneasy I felt. I decided to check the rest of the house, just to make sure no one was inside. My heartbeat had picked up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been in here while I was gone. I started with the kitchen, then moved into the living room. Everything was in place, just like I'd left it. No sign of anyone. No mess. Nothing out of the ordinary, except for that coat. I checked the windows and the back door, locking everything again just to be sure. I didn't know why, but I felt the need to double-check every single lock in the house, even though I had already done it earlier. After that, I went upstairs, trying to convince myself that I was just being stupid, that it was nothing. But when I reached my bedroom, I felt the same creeping unease as before. I couldn't shake the thought that something was off, even though everything seemed fine. My bed was made, nothing looked out of place. I locked the door behind me and just sat on the bed for a moment, trying to calm myself down. I kept going over the events in my head. How could that coat have gotten there? I'd been home for almost 15 minutes, and there was no way someone could have snuck in without me noticing. I'd heard no footsteps, no sound of the door opening, nothing. I considered calling the police, but what would I even tell them? That I found a coat in my bathroom and felt weird about it. Just as I was about to get up and go check again, I heard a soft sound downstairs, like a footstep. It was faint, but it was there. My blood ran cold. My heart started racing again, and I froze, staring at the door. The footsteps weren't loud or hurried, just soft, like someone walking carefully, trying not to make noise. I sat there for a few seconds, holding my breath. I knew I had locked everything. I knew I hadn't let anyone in. But that sound? It was unmistakable. I stood up slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone, but I couldn't bring myself to call the police yet. What if I was just imagining things? What if it was just the rain? But the longer I stood there, the more real the sound became. I crept toward the door, and when I reached it, I pushed it open just a crack. I listened, straining to hear anything. There was nothing. The house was still quiet. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my coat and keys and ran back downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I opened the front door and bolted outside, even though the rain was still coming down hard. I didn't care. I just needed to be out of that house. I stood on the porch for a few minutes, trying to calm down. I called my friend, asking if I could come over, and she immediately offered to pick me up. I didn't explain why. I just told her I needed to get out of the house. When I finally went back in with her, everything seemed fine. The front door was still locked. The coat was gone from the bathroom, and nothing seemed out of place anymore. But that didn't make it any better. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something, that someone had been there. I didn't sleep that night, and I never felt comfortable in my house again, even after everything seemed to go back to normal. I still don't know who left that coat, or why it was there, or if someone had been in my house while I wasn't looking. But I can't stop thinking about it, especially when it rains. It was one of those nights where everything felt off. The rain came down in sheets, hammering against the roof of my car as I drove home from work. The streets were empty, the kind of quiet that only happens when the weather's that bad. The windshield wipers barely kept up with the downpour, and the headlights barely pierced the darkness. I just wanted to get home and be done with it, but something about the night didn't feel right. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something strange. My car alarm was going off. It was a loud, shrill noise, cutting through the steady patter of the rain. I wasn't surprised. My car had been acting up lately, and the alarm had a habit of triggering for no reason. Still, it was annoying, especially with the storm, so I grabbed my keys and headed outside to shut it off. I got to the car, my feet splashing through puddles, the rain soaking me through. I could barely see through the windshield because of the rain, but I could hear the alarm blaring from inside. I reached for the button on my key fob and clicked it, but the alarm didn't stop. Frustrated, I clicked it again. And again. No change. I leaned in closer, pressing the fob to the window to make sure it was registering, but nothing happened. That's when I noticed something strange. The inside of the car was completely dark. No light from the street, no lights from inside the house, nothing. It was like the car was wrapped in some kind of black fog. I tried the fob one more time, and this time the alarm finally stopped. But as I stood there, dripping wet, a chill ran down my spine. I had that feeling that I wasn't alone, like someone was standing behind me, even though I couldn't see anyone. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the storm playing tricks on me. Still, I couldn't help but glance around the yard as I made my way back to the door. Everything was still. Too still. I didn't see any lights in the windows of my neighbors' houses, and the usual hum of the streetlights was missing, swallowed up by the rain. I shut the door behind me and went inside, trying to ignore the creeping unease that was following me. The warmth inside the house felt good, but something still didn't feel right. I started to take off my soaked jacket and boots when the alarm went off again. It was louder this time, sharper, almost like it was mocking me. I rushed back to the window and looked out into the dark driveway. The car was still there, sitting innocently under the tree, the rain hitting the roof in rhythmic beats. There was no one around. I sighed, feeling a little foolish, but I grabbed my keys and went back out anyway. I couldn't stand the noise. When I reached the car this time, I was careful to check the surroundings. Still no one. The street was empty. I pressed the fob again, but the alarm didn't stop this time. My heart started to beat a little faster. Why wouldn't it stop? Maybe the fob was broken? Maybe I was just missing something? I yanked open the driver's side door and climbed in, desperate to shut the noise off for good. I slammed the door shut, and that's when I noticed it. There was something on the windshield, something that I hadn't seen before. At first, I thought it was just raindrops or a smudge from the wipers, but as I looked closer, my stomach dropped. A muddy handprint was smeared across the inside of the windshield. It wasn't big, but it was unmistakable. A hand. Right there. The fingers stretched across the glass, the palm pressed flat against it, leaving a streak of dirt and grime in its wake. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I know I hadn't been in the car with muddy hands. I hadn't touched the windshield at all. I could barely even remember opening the door the first time. It was all a blur of frustration. My head spun with confusion and dread. Who had been in here? I reached for the handle, ready to get out and run back inside. But just as my fingers brushed the door, I heard something. A sound from the back of the car. A faint scratching, like fingernails on metal. I froze. My blood ran cold. It wasn't the sound of rain hitting the roof or the wind blowing through the trees. No. This was something else. Something closer. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and for a split second, I thought I saw something move in the reflection. I jerked my head around to look out the back window, but there was nothing there. Just darkness. I wasn't sure if it was the fear making me jumpy or if something was actually there. But I wasn't about to sit around and find out. I swung the door open and stepped out quickly, my legs almost giving way as I scrambled out of the car. The rain was still pouring down, but I didn't care. I slammed the door shut and ran back to the front door. As I reached the door, I looked over my shoulder again, half expecting to see someone standing there. But the driveway was empty. Everything was still. The only sound was the rain hitting the ground and the hum of the streetlights flickering on and off. I locked the door behind me and rushed to the window, peering out at the car one last time. The driveway was as empty as it had been when I arrived. There was no one there. The alarm had stopped, and the handprint was still visible in the windshield. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about that handprint, about the scratching sound, and the feeling that someone was watching me. I couldn't shake it, no matter how hard I tried. The next day, I checked the car again. The handprint was still there, and nothing else seemed out of place. No sign of a break-in, no sign of anyone having been inside the car. But the feeling didn't go away. I kept checking the locks, the windows, the car itself, but nothing ever seemed to add up. I don't know who was in my car that night, or how they got in, but I've never felt safe there since. Every time it rains, I think about that handprint, and I wonder if they're still out there, waiting for me to let my guard down again. It was one of those rainy nights when the world outside seemed to disappear, swallowed by sheets of water and the thundering sound of rain hitting the roof. I had just gotten settled on the couch, a blanket pulled up to my chin, the lights low, and my favorite movie playing. The kind of night where the outside world feels distant, like nothing could possibly interrupt the comfort of home. I'd been living in this small house for a couple of months. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it had that sense of quiet that I liked. The house sat on a quiet road, not a lot of traffic, not a lot of neighbors. It was a good place to retreat to after a long day. But that night, something was different. Around 10:30, as I was getting into the good part of the movie, there was a knock at the door. It was a soft knock, but loud enough to make me pause the movie and listen. The rain outside was coming down hard, and the wind was howling, so the knock was jarring, like an interruption I wasn't expecting. I didn't move immediately. I wasn't expecting anyone. Maybe a delivery, but I hadn't ordered anything. The knock came again, a little more insistent this time, and I knew I'd have to check. I stood up, feeling a slight unease, not because I was afraid, but just because I wasn't used to visitors out here. I walked over to the door and peeked through the peephole. There was a man standing on the porch, drenched from head to toe, his coat soaked through, his hair sticking to his forehead. He looked a little frantic, like he had been out in the rain for a while. He didn't look dangerous, just in need. I hesitated for a moment, and then the knock came again. I opened the door a crack, enough to speak without fully exposing myself. "Can I help you?" The man looked relieved to see me, but he didn't immediately speak. Instead, he took a step back and glanced around, almost like he was trying to figure out where he was. I couldn't see a car anywhere. No headlights through the rain, no car parked on the street. It was just him, standing there. "Hey, sorry to bother you," he said, his voice shaking slightly, like he was cold and wet. "My car broke down. I was wondering if I could use your phone to call a tow truck. I've been waiting out here for a while." I looked at him again, taking in the details. His clothes were muddy and soaked through, but his face didn't have that stressed out look of someone who'd been stuck in a broken down car for hours. He seemed more confused. Like he didn't quite know where he was, or maybe where his car was. "Yeah, sure," I said, still unsure. "Where's your car?" He looked over his shoulder toward the road, then back at me. His eyes flicked from the street, then back to me, like he couldn't quite remember where he had left it. It's back a little ways," he said, his voice a bit quieter now. "A couple of blocks, I think. But I really need to use your phone. Please." I wasn't about to let a guy stand out in the rain, especially in the middle of nowhere. I figured maybe he'd had a flat tire, maybe he really did need help. So, I stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in, I'll get you the phone," I said, trying to sound friendly but still cautious. The man stepped inside quickly, shaking off some of the water from his coat. I noticed he didn't seem to have any visible bags, nothing that looked like he'd been traveling with any kind of gear. That struck me as odd, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. I handed him my phone and he took it gratefully. "Thanks," he said, scrolling through the screen. I stood there, feeling a little awkward, watching him. Something about the way he was acting was just off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. He was standing a little too still, almost too focused on the phone, like he was trying to figure out what to do next. "You sure you're okay?" I asked. "I mean, I don't hear any car. You said it was a couple of blocks away, but..." He cut me off, holding up a hand. "It's fine. I'll just call the tow truck and I'll be out of your hair in a sec." I nodded and stepped back, not wanting to make him feel uncomfortable. I went to sit back down, but something nagged at the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was being evasive, that he wasn't telling me everything. He was still standing in the same spot, and I could hear him mumbling to someone on the phone, but his voice didn't sound quite right. Too calm, like he wasn't actually talking to anyone at all. I waited for what felt like a minute or two, watching him stand there, waiting for him to finish the call. But then I realized I hadn't heard any street sounds since he came in. No cars, no trucks, no sound of passing traffic. It was too quiet. The rain should have drowned out most noise, but it still seemed off. I stood up again, walking slowly toward the window by the door. I peeked outside, and the street was completely empty. No cars anywhere. I glanced down the road in both directions, nothing. I turned back to look at the man, and when he saw me watching, his eyes flicked to mine, but he didn't say anything. He didn't even move. He just stood there, silently holding the phone. I swallowed hard, starting to feel that creeping sense of dread. Something wasn't right. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're sure there's a car out there?" The man gave me a quick, almost forced smile. "Yeah, it's just around the corner. I just need to call for a tow." I stood there for a moment, my heart beating faster. I took a step forward, then stopped. He wasn't moving. He wasn't doing anything except staring at me. He didn't seem like he was waiting for the call to finish. He was just waiting. I didn't know why, but I suddenly felt a surge of panic. I didn't know what he was up to, but something felt wrong. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He wasn't acting like someone who had just broken down. He wasn't acting like someone who needed help. It was like he was waiting for something or someone. Like he didn't really need a tow truck and maybe never had. I turned toward the door. You know what? I think it's best if you go ahead and head back to your car. He looked at me for a long second. Then, without saying a word, he dropped the phone onto the table beside him, turned, and walked to the door. He opened it slowly, still not saying anything, and stepped out into the rain. I watched him disappear into the darkness, feeling a mix of confusion and relief. I waited a few more minutes before I closed the door and locked it behind me. I never saw him again. And I still don't know who he was, or where his car was. The strangest part is, I've been living here for months, and I've never seen that man anywhere in the neighborhood. Not once. It was one of those nights when the rain just wouldn't stop. It wasn't coming down in a steady sheet, more like a constant, uneven drizzle that soaked through your clothes within minutes. The wind was picking up, blowing the rain sideways, making the streets seem quieter than usual. I didn't mind, though. I like walking my dog, Lucy, especially when the weather made the streets feel like they belonged to me and me alone. I'd taken her out for a walk around the block, the usual route. She was a medium-sized mutt, mostly friendly but pretty alert. She wasn't the type to bark at every little thing, but she'd always been a little on edge around strangers. So, when she started pulling at the leash, barking like crazy, I figured maybe someone was walking by or there was a squirrel or something. But then I noticed what she was barking at. It was a man, standing under a streetlight at the corner of the block. The light above him was flickering, casting this weird stuttering glow that made it hard to get a good look at his face. I figured he was just some guy waiting for a break in the rain, trying to stay out of the downpour. But there was something about the way he stood there, so still, that made me uneasy. He wasn't wearing a raincoat or carrying an umbrella like most people would in weather like this. He was just standing there in regular clothes, jeans and a jacket, like he hadn't been caught in the rain at all. He didn't even seem to be bothered by the rain, not one bit. I could see him smiling, though. I couldn't make out the details of his face too well because of the light, but his smile was the only thing that stood out, and it wasn't a normal kind of smile. It was wide, almost unnaturally wide, like he was trying to hold it for too long, even though he wasn't saying anything. Lucy's barking was getting louder, almost frantic, tugging at the leash, wanting to get closer. She'd never acted like this before. I tried pulling her back, but she was having none of it. I looked at the man again. He hadn't moved. He was still standing there, just staring at us with that creepy smile. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me or Lucy, but the longer I stood there, the more uncomfortable I became. It felt like he was waiting for something, maybe even expecting something. But there was no reason for him to be standing there in the first place. I looked around. There weren't any cars nearby, no other people walking around. It was just me, Lucy, and this guy under a flickering streetlight in the middle of nowhere. I kept trying to pull Lucy back, but she wasn't having it. She was growling now, low in her throat, hackles raised. I could hear her nails scraping against the sidewalk as she tugged toward him. "Lucy, come on," I said, trying to stay calm, but she didn't listen. She was fixated on the man, and the longer I stood there, the more I felt like I couldn't move. I don't know why, but something in my gut told me I shouldn't take my eyes off him. I took a step back, then another, pulling at the leash, trying to get Lucy to follow. But she wasn't having it. She was dead set on this guy, barking louder now, her entire body tense. I took a breath and started walking backward slowly, keeping my eyes on the man, but as I moved, I noticed that he hadn't moved a muscle. His smile was still there, wide and creepy, but he was still saying nothing. No greeting, no apology, no attempt to make contact at all. Just standing there. The flickering streetlight above him made it hard to see his whole face, but there was something unsettling about the way his eyes didn't leave me. It felt like he was studying me. It made my skin crawl. I turned and started walking away quickly, hoping Lucy would follow, but she didn't. She was still staring at him, and I had to tug harder this time to get her moving. She wasn't happy about it. Her growls turned into whines, and she fought the leash. "Come on, Lucy," I muttered, pulling harder. Finally, she trotted after me, but she kept looking back. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting the guy to be following us, but he wasn't. He was still standing there, just like before, his smile never fading. I took a few more steps, heart racing, the whole situation just starting to sink in. There was no reason for this. I didn't know why, but everything about that man felt wrong. It was like he was waiting for something, like he was part of some strange game, and I was the one being tested. Lucy tugged at the leash again, more forceful this time, but I kept her close, my eyes flicking over my shoulder. The streetlight flickered again, and I could have sworn the man's figure was just a little closer now, standing a little further out of the shadows. But when I looked again, he was back to his original spot, his smile never faltering. I didn't dare look back a third time. I kept walking fast, picking up the pace, trying to get to the end of the block as quickly as possible. My pulse was racing. The whole thing felt surreal, like my mind was struggling to catch up with what was actually happening. When we finally turned the corner and reached the next block, I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just kept walking faster, Lucy tugging beside me, now calmer but still uneasy. I didn't stop until we got back to my front door. I couldn't stop thinking about the man under the streetlight. How long had he been standing there? How long had he been watching us before I even noticed? And why hadn't he moved? That night, I double-checked the locks on the door, locked the windows, and made sure all the lights were on. I sat on the couch, my heart still pounding. Lucy sat at my feet, occasionally looking up at me, like she was still on edge too. I still don't know who that man was, or what he wanted. But I do know I'll never walk Lucy on that street again after dark, especially when it's raining. And I can't seem to shake the feeling that I wasn't the only one watching that night. It was a rainy night. The kind of night where the rain doesn't let up, just constant drumming against the windshield, blurring the streetlights into soft, golden halos. I was driving home from a late shift at work, already exhausted, the kind of tired where you just want to get to bed and forget about everything for a few hours. The road was empty, save for a few other cars that occasionally passed by. The streets were nearly deserted. I don't know why, but something felt off. Maybe it was the weather, or just the lateness of the hour, but it felt like the world outside was pressing in. The rain hitting the glass, the wipers swishing back and forth, it all just seemed louder than usual. I tried to shake it off and focused on getting home. I was just about to cross the bridge that leads into my neighborhood when the fog on my windshield started to form. It always happens when the temperature drops like that, and my breath fogs up the glass. So, I flicked on the defrost and wiped at it with the sleeve of my jacket. The mist cleared enough for me to see, but there was still a slight haze. That's when I noticed the shape. For a second, I thought I was imagining things. It was a piece of paper stuck to the outside of the windshield, right in my line of sight. The rain had smudged it up so much that I couldn't really make out what it said. I frowned, confused. Was it there before? Did it fly onto my car somehow? I didn't remember seeing it when I got in. I flicked the wipers on, and they squeaked across the glass as they cleared the fog away. I leaned forward, squinting to get a better look. It wasn't the rain or the fog that had smudged it, it was a note, stuck to the outside of my windshield with what looked like wet, sticky residue. "We've met before." The words were short and to the point. My stomach dropped. I stared at it for a few moments, trying to process what I was reading. It felt like I was forgetting something. My mind raced. Had I left the car unlocked earlier? Did someone slip this onto my car while I was inside, unaware? The note wasn't something I would have left there. And who would write something like that? Who would leave a cryptic message, especially at this time of night? I shook my head, trying to push away the thoughts. It wasn't a big deal, right? Probably just some prank. The rain was coming down harder now, and the road was slippery, so I decided to focus on getting home. I checked my rearview mirror and glanced down at my phone quickly to see if there were any new texts. Everything looked fine. But then, as I glanced back up, my heart skipped a beat. A figure was standing by the side of the road. At first, I thought it was just someone waiting for a bus or something. But something about the way the figure stood made me feel uneasy. There was no umbrella or raincoat, just a person standing in the downpour. The figure wasn't moving at all, just standing there, facing the road. The streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and their face was hidden in the dark. I turned my head quickly and snapped my gaze back to the road. My hands tightened on the wheel. The figure didn't move. It wasn't even like they were trying to flag me down. They just stood there, still. And then, something made me look at the rearview mirror again. The person was gone. Just disappeared. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I glanced to the side, trying to convince myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks, but my heartbeat had quickened. Was I imagining things? It was possible that they just walked off, out of sight in the rain. But there was something about it that didn't sit right with me. I tried to focus on the road, but my mind kept going back to the figure. Had they been waiting for me? I told myself it was nothing, maybe someone who had just been standing under a streetlight, taking shelter from the rain. Maybe they had just been looking at the cars driving by, lost in their thoughts. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The further I drove, the more I felt like I was being followed. I know it sounds crazy, but it was like every time I looked in my side mirrors or the rearview mirror, I expected to see a pair of headlights, like someone was tailing me. The streets were dark and empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I turned onto the road leading into my neighborhood, the houses barely visible in the downpour. I still felt like I was being watched, but the worst part was that I didn't know why. I kept looking in the mirrors. The wipers sloshed across the windshield, trying to clear the rain, but everything was blurry. It wasn't even helping, and I still couldn't make out much of anything in front of me. When I got to the last turn before my house, I braked at the stop sign and looked around. My driveway was just ahead, but I felt frozen for a moment. Something was wrong. I hadn't seen any cars behind me in the last few minutes, but I still felt like I was being followed. I shook my head again. It was probably nothing. I pulled into my driveway and parked. The porch light was on, a soft glow casting a shadow in the rain-soaked yard. My heart was still beating faster than usual, my thoughts still jumbled, but I told myself to just breathe. It was late, I was tired, and I was letting my imagination run wild. I pulled the keys from the ignition, opened the car door, and stepped out. The rain hit me immediately, soaking my jacket. I grabbed my things and rushed to the front door, fumbling for the keys. When I opened it, I stepped inside, my heart still pounding. I slammed the door behind me and locked it quickly, still trying to shake the feeling of unease. It wasn't until I stood in the entryway that I saw it again. There was another piece of paper on the floor by the door. I froze, staring at it for a second, feeling my stomach churn. The handwriting was the same as the note on my windshield, but this one was shorter. It read, "Come out." I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at it, unable to move. My eyes darted to the window, half expecting to see someone out there in the rain, watching. I didn't know what to do. My mind raced, trying to come up with a reason for why this was happening. But nothing made sense. I walked over slowly, picked up the note, and immediately looked outside. No one was there. The rain poured down in sheets, but the yard was empty. I stared out into the darkness for a while longer, waiting for anything to happen. But nothing did. I locked the door again, double-checked the windows, and I didn't leave my house for the rest of the night. I was on my way home after a long shift at work. It was one of those nights where the rain doesn't just fall, it pours. The kind of downpour where the streets look like rivers and the windshield wipers can barely keep up. It wasn't late, but it felt like it was. The world outside the car was soaked and dark, and I just wanted to get home and sleep. I was on a stretch of road just outside town. There aren't a lot of streetlights out here, and everything felt quieter than usual. The cars that passed were few and far between, so I didn't expect to see anyone on the side of the road. It was already a little unsettling how empty it felt. Then I saw him. A man, standing at the edge of the road, waving his arm. At first, I thought maybe he was just trying to hail a ride, or maybe his car had broken down. I wasn't in the best mood, but I figured if he needed help, I could at least stop and make sure he was okay. It didn't look like anyone else was coming, so I pulled over to the side. I rolled down the window a bit and asked, "You need help?" The man was soaked through, his clothes clinging to his body. He looked to be in his 40s, maybe, with messy hair that was wet from the rain, dripping down his face. He was smiling, though it didn't seem all that comforting. It was more like a smile that was just a little too wide, a little too eager, given the situation. I thought it was weird, but I didn't want to judge him just yet. "My car broke down," he said, his voice thick with an accent I couldn't quite place. "Can you give me a ride to the nearest gas station? It's just a few miles away." I hesitated for a moment. It wasn't the most ideal situation, but there didn't seem to be anyone else around, and the last thing I wanted was for him to be stuck out here in the rain. I figured, why not? I've helped people before. So, I unlocked the passenger side door and told him to hop in. He got in without hesitation, looking relieved as he closed the door behind him. The rain hammered against the roof, and the car filled with the smell of wet clothing. "Thank you," he said, still smiling, but it felt more strained now. I didn't respond right away. I started to pull back onto the road, glancing over at him as I did. He seemed normal enough, though there was something off about him. He wasn't speaking much, and I could tell he was looking at me out of the corner of his eye, like he was trying not to make it obvious. The air in the car felt thick, uncomfortable, but I tried to push it out of my head. We were about halfway to the gas station when I noticed something weird in my rearview mirror. A shadow, moving. I thought I was imagining it at first, but when I looked closer, it was there again. Someone else. Standing just behind my car. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at the man beside me. He was still staring out the window, as if he didn't notice anything. I slowed down, then stopped the car completely, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. There, crouching low behind my car, was another figure. A person, hiding in the rain. I couldn't make out much of their features, just the shape of their body, low to the ground. They weren't moving, just crouched down, hidden from view by the dark and the rain. I felt a cold rush of panic hit me. "Is someone else with you?" I asked, trying to sound calm. The man turned to look at me, his smile now gone. His expression was unreadable. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice soft, almost too soft. I pointed at the mirror, but by the time he looked back, the person had disappeared. I waited, holding my breath, but the only thing I saw was the rain, splattering against the pavement. "Maybe you were seeing things," he said, his voice strangely flat. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what I'd seen, but I knew what it looked like. Someone had been crouching there, right behind my car. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something didn't add up. "Let's just keep going," I said, my voice a little sharper than I meant it to be. I wasn't sure why I felt so uneasy. It could have just been my nerves, the rain, the darkness. But the way the man had looked at me, how he had answered, it was off. I pressed my foot on the gas again, but I didn't go any faster. The road was slippery, and I wasn't about to risk losing control of the car. But now, I kept checking the rearview mirror constantly. I couldn't help it. For a minute, nothing happened. It was just the sound of the rain and the soft hum of the tires on wet pavement. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it again, another shadow, moving too fast for comfort. This time, it was closer to the car, almost as if it was following us. It was only for a moment, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. I glanced at the man again. He was staring straight ahead now, his face expressionless, like he wasn't even aware of what was happening. My heart began to race. I didn't know if I should keep going or stop the car. And then, it happened. As I turned another corner, I saw movement in the reflection of the window beside me. I whipped my head around, my eyes wide. There, right next to the car, was the person. A figure, running now, matching our speed. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as I jerked to a stop. The rain hit the windows harder now, the sound deafening in the silence that followed. I could barely breathe. "Are you?" I started, but I stopped when I saw the man beside me. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring straight ahead, his body unnaturally still. I didn't say anything. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. It was happening too fast, too much for me to process. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I needed to get out of there. I threw the car in reverse, not bothering to check if the figure was still there. My foot hit the gas again, and I sped backward, my heart pounding in my chest. I was disoriented, my mind racing with panic. The man didn't say a word. He didn't move. I backed up as fast as I could, then turned the wheel sharply and drove forward, the tires slipping as I made a sharp turn onto a side street. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get out of there. The whole world felt like it was closing in on me. By the time I reached a well-lit intersection, I finally let myself breathe. I slowed down and glanced in the rearview mirror again, my heart still thumping in my chest. There was no one behind me. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know who that man was, or who was hiding behind my car, or why I felt like I was being followed. But I didn't look back after that. I drove straight to the nearest gas station, parked, and stayed in the car for a while before I could even think about leaving. I'm not sure if I'll ever understand what happened. I'm not sure if I even want to. But I do know one thing. I'll never stop for someone in the rain again. It was a rainy night, the kind where the streets look empty and everything just feels off. I had just gotten home from work, wet from the downpour. My hair was sticking to my face, and I couldn't wait to get out of my damp clothes and relax. The sound of the rain against the windows was strangely comforting as I kicked off my shoes and grabbed a towel to dry off. I didn't expect anyone to stop by. I'd been living in this neighborhood for a while, and I wasn't exactly the social type. I liked being alone, and most people respected that. My phone was on silent, and the TV was playing some random show. It was just the kind of evening where I wanted nothing more than to sit in my own space and forget about everything. That's why when the doorbell rang, I was immediately on edge. It wasn't a casual knock either. It was like someone was really trying to get my attention. And it felt wrong, you know? I froze for a second, just listening to the sound of the rain outside, then the doorbell again. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. It wasn't like I was expecting anyone. No friends, no family. My first thought was that it could be someone lost or maybe a delivery person. But it was almost 9 p.m. Why would someone be delivering something at this time of night? Still, I figured I should at least check. I wasn't the type to ignore people at my door, so I walked over slowly, peeking through the peephole. What I saw made my stomach drop. The person standing on my porch wasn't facing the door. They were just standing there, soaked to the bone, their back completely to me. The rain was coming down hard, making their silhouette even more difficult to make out. I couldn't tell if they were tall or short, male or female. They were just standing there, motionless. I'm not sure why, but I didn't open the door right away. Something in my gut told me to wait. The air around me felt suddenly heavy, like the atmosphere itself was waiting for something. I stayed at the peephole for what felt like forever, my heart pounding in my chest. The longer I watched, the more uneasy I felt. There was no movement. No sound. Nothing except the rain. I tried to convince myself it was probably nothing. Maybe they were waiting for someone, maybe they were lost. But that didn't explain why they weren't facing the door, why they weren't even moving. And the longer I watched, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I could have just ignored it, right? I could have gone back to my couch and pretended I didn't hear the doorbell. But I didn't. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I even say? There's someone standing at my door, facing away from me in the rain? They think I was crazy. I decided to call out through the door, my voice shaky. Hello? Can I help you? The person didn't respond. Not even a twitch. I felt a surge of frustration. Maybe they didn't hear me. Maybe they were too wrapped up in whatever was going on in their head. Maybe they just couldn't hear the doorbell over the rain. So I tried again, this time louder. Hey, are you all right? Still nothing. Not a single movement. I didn't know what to do. I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, trying to figure out what was going on. My eyes flicked nervously to the window beside the door, where I could see the rain pooling on the ground outside. The streetlight flickered, casting strange shadows on the porch, but still no movement from the person standing there. My instinct told me to open the door. But I didn't. Something inside me was screaming not to. After what felt like an eternity, I decided to try something else. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Maybe they'd leave if I just gave it some time. But just as I turned to walk away, I heard the faintest sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the other side of the door. My breath caught in my throat. I froze. It was like the air itself had become colder, and I was trapped in that moment, wondering if I should run, scream, or lock myself in the bathroom. The footsteps stopped after a few seconds, but I didn't dare look back at the door. I couldn't. I felt a sense of complete helplessness, like I was being watched, like there was something far worse outside than just some stranger standing in the rain. I stayed there, in the middle of the hallway, not knowing what to do. Then, the doorbell rang again. I felt my pulse spike. This time, though, the person didn't wait long before they spoke, their voice muffled, almost like they were talking through the door. "I just need to use your phone, please. My car broke down. I'm stranded." I didn't believe them. There was no car. I hadn't heard any car pull up outside. No headlights, no engine, nothing. "Where's your car?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They didn't respond right away, just stood there in silence. Then, after a long pause, they said, "It's just down the street. Please, I really need help." Something in their voice felt off. It wasn't desperation, it was too calm, too collected. And that's when I finally realized I didn't know this person. I didn't know anything about them. I backed away from the door, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I couldn't open it. I couldn't let them in. There was no car, no reason for them to be out here. I didn't know what they wanted or why they were standing there so eerily still, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to find out. I grabbed my phone and called the police, trying to stay as quiet as possible. I told them there was a person at my door, acting suspiciously, and I felt unsafe. They told me to stay inside and wait. Not long after, I saw flashing lights outside through the peephole. The person outside didn't seem to react. They just stood there, wet and unmoving, as if they had been waiting for something. A car pulled up, and 2 officers approached. One of them knocked on the door while the other looked around the yard. The person standing outside never turned around. They just stayed facing away from the door, completely still, like they hadn't heard a thing. The officers took it from there. I didn't know what happened after that. I was too shaken to watch. But the whole thing didn't feel right, not even for a second. And the moment they were gone, the rain started to let up, leaving the world outside quieter, colder. I never found out who that person was or what they wanted. I didn't sleep that night, and I still don't know what would have happened if I'd opened the door. But I know one thing for sure, I'm never answering the door at night again, not without knowing who's on the other side. I just left my cousin's place, stayed too long playing board games and messing around with her old keyboard, and by the time I stepped outside, it was pouring. The kind of rain where everything feels smaller, like your whole world's just your headlights and the road in front of you. I live about 20 minutes from her place if traffic's good, but there's this stretch of back road I usually take that cuts through a semi-rural area. Few houses, a couple fields, mostly trees. No streetlights, no sidewalk. I always drive it a little slower at night. About halfway through, I saw hazard lights blinking ahead. It was an old beige sedan pulled off to the side. The hood was up, and the driver's door was open. I slowed a little, partly out of habit, partly just curious. As I got closer, I saw a guy standing next to the open hood, wearing a hoodie, the light kind, gray with dark sleeves. He had one hand tucked into the pocket of his jeans, and the other holding the hood up like it needed help staying open. I would have kept going, honestly, but as I passed, he stepped into the road and waved. Not frantically, just a quick one-handed wave. I pulled over maybe 20 feet ahead of his car. Put my hazards on. He jogged up to my passenger side, so I cracked the window. Rain blew in as soon as I did. He leaned down, looked maybe mid-30s, pale, beard stubble, tired looking. He said, "Sorry, my phone's dead. Can I use yours real quick? I just need to call my brother. He's 5 minutes away." I hesitated, but I handed him my phone. I figured, okay, 5 minutes away, he makes a call, gets picked up. No big deal. He took it without saying thanks. That should have bothered me, but I didn't think much about it at the time. He turned and walked a few feet back toward his car, still holding my phone. I watched him, kind of annoyed he didn't just make the call right there. He stood next to his car for a second, screen lighting up his face, then he looked over his shoulder and said, "Yeah, it's not going through. Spotty out here." I'm just texting him. I said, "All right," and waited. Another minute passed. He was still typing, not looking at me. Then he said, without turning around, "I think my friends are closer actually. They'll handle it." That's what he said. They'll handle it. Then he just put my phone in his hoodie pocket. I sat up straight. "Hey, can I get that back?" He didn't answer. I asked again, louder, "Can you give me my phone?" He looked over at me, totally blank expression, like I'd asked him something boring. Then he said, "It's fine. Don't worry. They'll come." He turned his back to me again. That's when I got a gut punch feeling. Not panic yet, but that deep cold you get when something's really off and you know it. I opened my door a few inches and leaned out. "Hey, man, seriously. I need my phone." He didn't move. I got out, walked halfway toward him, keeping my distance. Rain hit hard against my jacket, soaking my pants. He turned slowly and looked right at me. Didn't smile. Didn't frown. Just looked. I said, "It's fine," he said. His tone wasn't angry. It was calm. That's what made it worse. I stopped walking. We stared at each other maybe 3 seconds. Then he said, "You should go. You don't want to be here when they show up." My heart started racing. "I'm not leaving without my phone," I said. He didn't respond. I started backing up. I wasn't going to get into a fight over a phone, but something about how still he was, how sure he seemed, freaked me out more than if he'd yelled at me. I got back in my car, locked the doors. He turned away again, like he was done with me. I sat there, thinking. No signal, no phone, just rain and the dashboard lights. Then I saw headlights in the distance behind me. A car coming. I felt this weird sense of hope for a second, thinking maybe it was a cop or just someone who'd stop and help. But as it got closer, I started to feel worse. The car was slowing down, pulling to the side, parking behind both of us. No flashing lights. Just idling. The man with my phone turned, walked toward the new car, and got in the back seat. No words, no rush. I couldn't see inside the car. Windows were fogged and tinted. They didn't leave. Just sat there. No one got out. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call anyone. I couldn't drive off without risking getting boxed in. So I sat for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. Then the passenger door of the second car opened, just slightly, and a man stepped out. He looked around, saw me still sitting there. Then he shut the door and leaned on the car like he was waiting. No umbrella. Just standing in the rain. Then another guy got out of the back seat, came around and popped their trunk. I swear I saw something metal inside, couldn't tell what. Maybe a jack. Maybe tools. That's when I threw my car in reverse, hard. I backed up into the grass, cutting wide around their car, and floored it back the way I came. My tires spun a little in the mud, but I made it onto the road. I looked in the mirror. They hadn't followed me. Not right away. About a mile later, I saw headlights again. Same shape. No high beams. I sped up. I took every turn I could, even the long way through residential streets. I didn't go home. I went to a gas station with bright lights and people around. Pulled up, got out, told the cashier to call the cops. They let me use their phone. I reported it all. Gave my info. Filed a report. Never got my phone back. Cops said they didn't find anyone out there when they checked. Said the plate I described didn't match anything in the system. They asked if maybe I misremembered. I didn't. I remember every second of that night like I'm still sitting in my car, watching him slip my phone into his pocket like it didn't matter. Like I wasn't a person to him. Just someone passing through. Someone in the wrong place. It was around 10:30 at night, and the rain had been going steady for a couple of hours. I was driving home from my sister's place. She lives about 40 minutes out of town, and I'd always regret staying that late when the weather's bad. My wipers were going full speed, and I still couldn't see much beyond 10 feet in front of the car. The highway was nearly empty. About 15 minutes from home, I had to take the back roads. No streetlights, just long stretches of trees and runoff ditches. The kind of road where you slow down when you see headlights coming, not out of courtesy but because it's the only thing keeping you oriented. I was rounding a bend when I saw someone standing on the shoulder, barely lit by my headlights. They were soaked like they'd been out in the storm for a while. At first I thought it was some kind of prank. But when I got closer, I saw it was a guy, maybe in his late 20s or 30s, wearing what looked like a gray hoodie and dark jeans. He had his thumb out. I passed him. That was my first instinct to keep driving. But about 30 seconds later, I slowed down. I thought, what if that was me out there? No phone, no signal, middle of nowhere. So I turned around. When I pulled up next to him, I rolled the window down a few inches and asked where he was headed. He didn't answer right away, just looked at me through the window like he wasn't sure if he'd imagined me stopping. "Can I get in?" he asked, kind of shouting over the rain. I hesitated, then hit the unlock button. "Yeah, but just to town," I said. "I'm not going farther than that." He climbed in fast, slammed the door, and didn't say a word. Water pooled on the seat under him. He just stared straight ahead. "Where to?" I asked after a few seconds. He didn't answer. Just reached over and hit the lock button. All the doors clicked shut. That made me go cold. I laughed, kind of nervously. "You okay, man?" Still nothing. I glanced at him, and he wasn't looking at me, not even a little. He was staring at the dashboard. Like blank, not blinking, like his brain wasn't even in the car. I said, "I can take you to town." I tried again. "Where in town?" He didn't turn his head, but I saw his jaw move like he was chewing on the inside of his cheek. Then he said, "Just drive." I could hear how calm he was. Too calm. It wasn't a panic "just drive" or a grateful "thanks for the ride." It was flat. Almost bored. I didn't move. My hands were still on the steering wheel, but I didn't shift into drive. "I need to know where you're going," I said, trying to keep my voice even. He turned his head a little, not looking at me exactly, but out my side of the windshield. I said, "Just drive," he said again. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a threat. But I felt trapped. It was like the way he said it had a weight behind it. And the car doors being locked, I couldn't stop thinking about that. So I put it in drive. The rain picked up again, and the wipers started slapping back and forth. I kept glancing at him, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. He still hadn't told me where he wanted to go. He didn't ask me for anything. He didn't even seem interested in me at all. After a few miles, I reached over and flicked on the heater vents. He was dripping on everything. I asked again, "Do you live around here?" Nothing. Then I noticed he didn't have anything with him. No backpack, no bag, no phone in his hands. Just soaked clothes and sneakers caked in mud. "Were you walking long?" I tried. "You must have been freezing out there." Still nothing. I started getting pissed. I didn't say anything out loud, but I was running through options in my head. Should I turn around, pull over at a gas station, drive straight to the police station? That last one stuck. So I kept driving, but I changed my route. There's a 24-hour station just outside town. I figured I'd act like I was going to stop for gas, or maybe say I had to use the restroom. Just something to get out of the car. We passed a mile marker and a small convenience store that was dark. I slowed a little, trying not to look obvious. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke again. "You passed the turn." I felt a jolt, like he'd read my mind. "What turn?" I asked. "The one that goes up toward the quarry." "There's nothing out there," I said. "That road's a dead end." He turned his head fully then and looked at me for the first time. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired. Like he hadn't slept in days. "Just turn around," he said. That was it. I didn't argue. I pulled off to the side, like I was going to make a U-turn. I even reached for the shifter. But instead, I threw the car in park and yanked the keys out of the ignition. Then I popped the locks and opened the door all in one motion. The second I stepped out, I ran. I didn't think. I just sprinted into the trees on the side of the road, slipping on wet leaves and stumbling over roots. I heard the car door open behind me. Then I heard his footsteps. He didn't shout. He didn't chase me fast. Just that steady sound, crunch, crunch, splash, moving into the woods behind me. I crouched behind a down log, breathing through my mouth so I wouldn't make noise. The rain helped. It was so loud I could barely hear myself think. After a few minutes, the footsteps stopped. I stayed frozen for I don't know how long. My jeans were soaked, and I was shivering. I kept picturing him standing just behind a tree, waiting for me to move. Eventually, I didn't hear anything. Just the rain. So I crawled, then walked, then ran again until I found another road. It took me 20 minutes of walking before I saw headlights. The woman who picked me up was cautious at first, understandably. But when she saw how wet and shaken I was, she let me in. I told her everything. She drove me straight to the police station. They found my car the next morning, abandoned on the side of the road. The passenger door was wide open. There was no sign of the guy. No fingerprints. No tire tracks. Nothing. I didn't pick up another hitchhiker after that. And I never drive that road at night anymore. I wasn't dreaming or anything. I just sort of woke up. Maybe it was the rain. It had been coming down hard all night, steady and loud, making that constant drumming sound on the roof and windows. I sat up a bit, wiped my face. The house was quiet. Then I heard a knock. Not from the front door. Not even the back door. It was from the window next to my bed. It wasn't loud, just one quick, deliberate tap. That glass on knuckle kind of sound. I froze. My bedroom is on the second floor. There's no porch roof underneath, no tree nearby that someone could climb. Just a plain wall of siding all the way up. I waited. Thought maybe I imagined it. Could have been something from the wind or the rain, right? Then I heard it again. Tap. Exactly the same. Same spot. Same tempo. That's what really messed with me. It sounded intentional. Like someone was knocking to get my attention. I stayed there for a second, completely still, heart pounding, and finally got up. I walked to the window but didn't look out right away. I moved the curtain just slightly with my finger and peeked through the gap. Nobody. The street was empty. The porch light lit up the yard just enough to see that no one was standing below. I exhaled a little too hard and almost laughed at myself. I was just about to let the curtain fall back into place when I noticed something else. My car's windshield wipers were going. It was parked at the curb right in front of the house. I could see the blades moving back and forth rhythmically. The car was off. I hadn't driven it since the afternoon. There was no reason the wipers should be on. I leaned in a little closer, squinting through the rain. No lights on in the car. Just the wipers, swiping over and over across the wet glass. It was subtle, but I felt that twist in my stomach. Something was wrong. I went downstairs slowly. Every creak in the steps felt 10 times louder than usual. I unlocked the front door and stepped onto the porch. The rain was still going, not quite pouring but enough to soak me in a few minutes. I stood there a second, listening, then stepped out and started toward the car. I didn't go straight to it. I walked along the edge of the yard, toward the driver's side, watching to see if there was someone inside. I didn't see movement. I didn't see anything. When I got to the door, I tried the handle. Locked. I stepped back and looked around again, scanning the sidewalk, the neighboring houses, the bushes across the street. Nothing. Then I saw the footprints. They were in the grass, coming from the sidewalk. Wet shoe prints, pressed deep, not yet washed away by the rain. They went up to the side of the house, around the side yard. I followed them with my eyes, just to the edge of the porch, to the wall directly under the window by my bed. I turned back to the street. Still empty. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me. This time I made sure to throw the deadbolt. I went into the kitchen, grabbed my phone from the counter. I hadn't taken it upstairs when I went to bed. I didn't call the cops. Not yet. I stood there for a while, just gripping it, listening. Nothing else happened for the next half hour. Eventually, I went back to bed, though I didn't sleep. I just lay there watching the window, waiting for another knock. The next morning, the wipers were off. 3 days went by. I didn't tell anyone. I don't know why. Maybe it felt too weird, like I wouldn't know how to explain it without sounding paranoid. I kept checking the car obsessively, though. Locking the doors 3 times. Keeping the porch light on all night. Then, Friday night, it started raining again. I was in the living room, just watching something on TV with the volume low. I kept glancing at the front window, feeling tense, like I was waiting for something to happen. I didn't know what. A little after midnight, I went to lock up. I stood by the door for a second, thinking about whether I should check outside again, just to be sure. I looked through the peephole. There was someone standing in the street. Not close. Just barely in the glow of the streetlight. A man, maybe late 30s or 40s. Couldn't make out much because of the raincoat and the hood, but he was facing the house. facing me. I stayed there, not breathing, watching him. He didn't move. After maybe a minute, he turned slowly and walked down the sidewalk. No rush. Just walked off into the dark. That night, I slept on the couch with a baseball bat and the lights on. The last thing happened 2 days later. It was still raining. I hadn't left the house all day. I was working from home, keeping the blinds down, only getting up for food or the bathroom. I was honestly starting to feel kind of ridiculous, like maybe I'd built it up too much in my head. Then, sometime after 1 a.m., I got thirsty. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and as I was turning off the faucet, I heard a faint scraping sound. It was coming from the back door. I froze. It wasn't knocking this time. Just a light, slow drag like something metal over the door frame. I crept over and looked through the tiny frosted window in the center. I couldn't see anything clearly. I backed away and went around to the hallway, flipped the back porch light on. No one was there. But as I looked out, something clicked in my head. The gate to my backyard, the one I always keep latched, was swinging open. That was it for me. I called the cops. They came, checked the property. Nothing. No one around. They said there'd been reports of people trying car doors and looking through windows in the area the past week. Told me to keep everything locked and call if it happened again. It didn't. But the footprints? They were back. Clear as day in the mud, leading up to my back door. This time, they didn't go back toward the gate. They stopped right there on the mat. Like whoever it was stood there for a while. Just waiting. It was just a normal jog, nothing out of the ordinary. I've always been the type of person to run in the mornings, around the same time, along the same route. It's peaceful, and it helps clear my mind before the craziness of the day. The route I take is mostly quiet, passing through some residential streets and a small park. I've been doing it for months now, and it's become part of my routine. One morning, though, I noticed something. There was a car parked at the curb near the end of the street. It was an older model, dark-colored sedan. Nothing too strange about it, really, except that it was there at the same time I was running, and the man sitting inside it was just staring ahead, not doing anything. He didn't look like he was waiting for anyone. He didn't seem like he was doing anything. He was just there. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just someone parked, taking a break, or on their phone. I passed by it like I usually do and continued my run. The next day, I noticed the same car again, parked in the same spot. The man was there again, sitting in the driver's seat, staring out the window. He didn't seem to notice me, but I couldn't help but feel a little off. It wasn't like I was scared or anything, but something about it felt strange. I figured it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was someone who worked in the area or lived nearby. I didn't think much more of it and went about my run. A couple of days later, though, the car was there again. This time, I noticed something new. The man was watching me. His eyes followed me as I ran by, but it wasn't the kind of look someone gives you when they're just noticing someone. It felt intentional, like he was focused on me. And that's when I started to feel uneasy. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But each day, the car was there. The man was there. Always sitting, always watching. I started to wonder if maybe I was just seeing things, overthinking it. But then came the day when things changed. I was halfway through my run when I noticed that the car, which was usually parked in that same spot, was now moving. The man was driving slowly, keeping a distance behind me. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I just kept running, trying to brush it off. But then I realized he wasn't just passing by. He was following me. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but when I turned onto the next street, I noticed the car was still behind me. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Just enough to make me feel like I was being tracked. I could feel my heart start to race. I told myself again that it was nothing, that it could just be a coincidence. But it didn't feel like one. I picked up my pace, trying to get to a busier street, hoping there'd be more people around. The car followed. It didn't speed up, but it didn't slow down either. I took a sharp turn onto a side street and glanced back, just enough to see the car still trailing me. At this point, my stomach was in knots. I didn't want to panic, but I couldn't help it. I kept running, faster now, hoping I could outrun this situation. After what felt like forever, I turned a corner, hoping the car would be gone, but it wasn't. It was still there, moving slowly behind me, but now it was getting closer. I could hear the engine, just faintly. My legs were starting to feel weak. I was close to my house, and I wanted to get there, but my instincts told me to keep running. If I stopped, I felt like something would happen. Finally, I reached the end of the street where my house was, and I looked back one more time. The car was still there, but now it was stopped. The man was sitting in the driver's seat, just staring at me. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't stop running. I turned around, went straight into my house, and locked the door behind me. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I had just narrowly escaped something, but I couldn't explain it. My heart was still racing. My mind was reeling. Was it a coincidence? Was he just out for a drive? I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid. But it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like something I could brush off. For the next few days, I tried to go about my routine, but the feeling that I was being watched never really left. I kept expecting to see that same car, that same man, every time I went for a run. And it wasn't just when I was running. I saw the car parked a few blocks away from my house on some days, just sitting there, as if waiting for me to come outside. I started to avoid the area where I usually ran. I took different routes, even though it made my workouts harder. I wasn't sure if he was following me still, or if I was just paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then, a week later, I went for my usual run again, a different route this time. And that's when I saw the car. It was parked on the side of the road, in a place I hadn't seen it before. The man was sitting in the driver's seat, but this time, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking down, like he was waiting for something. It was the same car, the same man. But now I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't run past it this time. I didn't take any chances. I stopped, turned around, and went straight back home. I've been changing my route ever since. I haven't seen the car again, but the strange feeling still lingers. It's been weeks, and every time I go for a run, I look around, half expecting to see that car again. I don't know who he was or why he followed me, but I know now that I'll never run the same way again. It was one of those nights where everything felt still, too still. I was driving home after visiting a friend out of town, and the drive back was taking longer than I expected. The roads were empty, and I was already tired. I kept glancing at the clock on my dashboard at 12:45 a.m. I wasn't too far from home, but I still had another 30 minutes of driving ahead of me, and I could feel my eyes getting heavy. The headlights of my car illuminated the dark road ahead, and the occasional streetlight cast long shadows on the pavement. I had driven this route a dozen times before, and it always felt like a quiet, peaceful drive. I wasn't expecting anything unusual to happen. But then, out of nowhere, I saw it. A car parked on the side of the road. Its hazard lights were blinking in the darkness, cutting through the quiet like a warning. It was an older model, something I couldn't quite place, parked halfway off the shoulder. There was no one else around, just me and this car. At first, I thought maybe it had broken down. I didn't want to pass by and ignore someone who might need help. I didn't think twice. I wasn't in a rush, and I wasn't scared of being on this road alone. I thought if I could help, why not? I slowed down, then pulled over a few feet behind the car. I checked my rearview mirror to make sure no one was speeding up behind me. When I glanced at the car, I saw a figure through the foggy windshield, sitting behind the wheel. The car's engine was off, but the hazard lights were still on. I wasn't sure if the person had seen me, so I turned off my engine and got out of the car. I made my way toward the driver's side, trying to appear as friendly as possible. I wasn't nervous, just someone stopping to do the right thing. That's how I felt. As I walked closer, the driver rolled down the window. He was a man, maybe in his 30s, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. His face looked tired, but not frantic. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, trying to gauge his situation. "Yeah," he said, with a sigh that almost sounded rehearsed. "Just had some engine trouble. My car just stopped running. I think it's the alternator or something. I don't really know much about cars, though. You wouldn't happen to have a jumper cable, would you?" I paused, not sure what to make of it. It wasn't too late, but it wasn't the kind of thing I'd expect to happen on this road. "I'm not sure I have one on me. I can call someone for you though, if you'd like. A tow truck or roadside assistance?" He looked relieved, but there was a strange glimmer in his eyes, almost like he was waiting for something. "I'd appreciate that," he said quickly. "I can't really stay out here too long. It's kind of sketchy. I don't want anyone else pulling up, you know?" I nodded, thinking it made sense. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, ready to make a quick call to the roadside assistance service I had on speed dial. But as I unlocked my phone and started to dial, I heard something. A soft crunching noise. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I looked up, the driver was staring at me through his open window. His eyes were wide, almost too wide, and his lips were pressed into a thin line. "Hey, just one more thing," he said, his voice suddenly quieter. "Could you maybe back up a little bit? I don't want you to get in the way while I get this fixed. You can just wait in your car for a minute, yeah? I'll be fine." I didn't see why not. It was a bit odd, but I figured he was just trying to make space. I backed up a few steps, moving toward my car, but something didn't feel right. The man didn't seem to be in any real distress. It was the way he kept looking at me, like he wasn't worried about the car but was more focused on me. I glanced over at my car, then back at the man, and I saw him quickly glance over his shoulder. I didn't think much of it at first, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I was starting to get a bad feeling. That's when I heard it. A soft tap on the rear of my car. It was so quiet I almost convinced myself it was just a branch brushing against the bumper, but when I turned my head, I saw someone moving behind my car. My heart dropped into my stomach. There was another man. He was creeping along the back of my vehicle, too quietly for me to hear his footsteps until he was almost at the side. My mind started racing. Was he waiting for me to turn around? Was this some kind of setup? I should have listened to that voice inside me that had told me not to stop in the first place. I quickly reached for the door handle to get back into my car, but before I could even pull the door open, the man who had been behind the wheel of the car stepped out and walked toward me. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice shaky now. I couldn't stop glancing between him and the shadowy figure moving behind me. My hand was already on the door handle, but I wasn't sure I could make it in time. "I told you to wait in the car," the man said, his tone shifting. It was less friendly now, more demanding, like he had changed his mind. His body language was different, too. He was standing taller now, and the friendly, helpless attitude he had moments ago was gone. I didn't answer. I could feel my heart beating in my chest, fast and heavy. I had to act. I had to get away. I swung open the door and jumped into the front seat, locking the door behind me. Before I could start the engine, the man came around to the driver's side. He knocked on the window. His expression had completely changed. There was no more tiredness in his eyes, no more pretending. His face was cold, his lips barely moving as he said, "You shouldn't have done that. You should have stayed out here." I couldn't move. I just stared at him through the glass. I could see the other man was now at the back of my car, his hand pressed against the trunk, his face hidden in the shadows. I felt paralyzed, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to get out of there now. My hand was shaking as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I hit the gas before I even fully had the car in gear. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I just kept driving, my hands tight on the wheel, my eyes focused on the road. I didn't care how fast I was going. I just wanted to be as far away from that place as possible. I didn't stop until I saw the lights of a gas station up ahead, and even then, I didn't feel safe. I can still hear the sound of their footsteps in my head sometimes. The soft crunch of gravel, the way the man had knocked on my window as I locked myself inside. It all felt like a setup from the start. I don't know what they were planning, but I'm glad I didn't stick around to find out. Weddings are supposed to be joyful, right? A celebration of love and family. That's what I kept telling myself when my cousin Clara married Tim last spring. It was a beautiful day, clear skies, blooming flowers, everything picture perfect. At least, it started that way. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and by the time we got to the reception hall, everyone was in good spirits. The band was playing, the food was incredible, and the open bar was keeping people happy. Clara looked radiant, and even though Tim seemed nervous, he was clearly smitten with her. I just finished my first plate of appetizers when I noticed him. He was leaning against the bar, chatting with a group of my uncles. His suit was sharp but slightly out of style, like he'd borrowed it or bought it for an event years ago and never wore it again. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had a big smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I assumed he was one of Tim's relatives. I mean, there were a lot of people there I didn't recognize. Clara and Tim had invited nearly 200 guests, and our family's big enough that I still don't know some of my second and third cousins. But something about him made me pause. I noticed he wasn't holding a drink, which seemed odd given how much my uncles were knocking back. He was nodding and laughing along with whatever story they were telling, but his eyes kept scanning the room, almost like he was looking for someone. I shrugged it off. It wasn't my business, and I wasn't about to start interrogating random guests. The night wore on, and I forgot about him for a while. The speeches happened, the cake was cut, and people started hitting the dance floor. It was around then that I noticed him again, this time sitting at one of the far tables, talking to Clara's grandmother. She looked uncomfortable. Now, Grandma Helen isn't exactly a pushover. She's got this sharp wit and a no-nonsense attitude, so it was strange to see her looking so uneasy. The man was leaning in close, speaking quietly, but every now and then, his voice would rise just enough for me to catch snippets. Family history, always wanted to connect, distant cousin on your husband's side. I walked over, trying to play it casual. "Hey, Grandma, everything okay?" I asked, shooting the man a polite but curious look. "Oh, yes, dear," Helen said quickly, her voice a little too bright. "This is, Andrew. He says he's related to us through, what was it again?" "Through your late husband," Andrew said smoothly. His voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was something about the way he said late husband that made me bristle. I didn't recognize the name he gave, but again, I figured it wasn't my place to question him. Helen, however, looked skeptical. "Well, it's lovely to meet you," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm going to steal Grandma for a dance, if you don't mind." Andrew nodded, that strange smile never leaving his face. Once we were a safe distance away, I asked, "Who's that guy?" "I have no idea," Helen whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "He claims to be family, but I've never heard of him before. And he was asking all sorts of odd questions about who's here tonight, what everyone does for work, things like that." My stomach dropped. I didn't like the sound of that. For the rest of the evening, I kept an eye on him. He drifted from group to group, always inserting himself into conversations, always asking questions. At one point, I saw him talking to Tim, who looked visibly uncomfortable. When I finally got a moment with Clara, I asked her about him. "Do you know that guy, the one in the gray suit?" I asked. Her face clouded. "No." Tim said he's some cousin on his mom's side, but when I asked his mom, she didn't know who he was either. "Didn't you guys have a seating chart?" "Yeah, but he said he RSVP'd late and didn't get assigned a seat." I didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't want to ruin her night, so I just nodded and let it go. But the whole situation was gnawing at me. By the end of the night, people were starting to leave. Clara and Tim were getting ready for their send-off, and the staff was beginning to clean up. I went to grab my jacket from the coat check and saw Clara frantically searching through her bag. "Everything okay?" I asked. "My purse," she said, her voice shaking. "It's gone. It was under the table during dinner, and now it's gone." We searched everywhere at the table, the dance floor, even the bathrooms, but it was nowhere to be found. It wasn't just her purse, either. Tim's watch, which he'd taken off while dancing, was missing. So was one of the envelopes from their gift table. I didn't have to say it. We were all thinking the same thing. Andrew was nowhere to be found. We checked with the staff, but no one remembered seeing him leave. The security cameras in the reception hall were only pointed at the entrances, and while they showed him arriving earlier in the evening, there was no footage of him leaving. It was like he'd vanished. The police were called, but there wasn't much they could do. Clara and Tim gave them a description, and we all racked our brains trying to remember any details he might have let slip. But there was nothing concrete. The worst part? A few days later, when Clara was going through the wedding photos, she found him in the background of several shots, always lurking just out of focus. In one, he was standing by the gift table, a faint smirk on his face. We never saw him again. To this day, I can't go to a wedding without scanning the crowd for faces I don't recognize. And every time, I wonder if Andrew's out there, crashing someone else's special day, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I had been looking forward to this trip for months. A solo getaway to decompress, clear my head, and get some writing done. I booked a modest hotel in a quiet city where I wouldn't know anyone, deliberately choosing some place that didn't feel too touristy. The hotel itself wasn't fancy, but it had good reviews online and seemed clean and safe, exactly what I needed. The first night was uneventful. I had dinner at a small cafe nearby, came back to the room, and spent a couple of hours watching TV before heading to bed. The room was on the 4th floor, tucked at the end of a long hallway. It was quiet, with the faint hum of the HVAC system filling the silence. I liked the solitude. The second night, however, was when things got strange. It was around 10 p.m. I'd spent most of the day walking around the city and was feeling tired but satisfied. After a long shower, I changed into pajamas and settled into bed with my laptop, trying to work on a short story I'd been meaning to finish. I'd barely typed a paragraph when I heard a soft knock at the door. It startled me. I hadn't ordered room service or requested anything from the front desk. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it, but then it came again, louder this time. "Housekeeping," a woman's voice called out. I frowned. It didn't make sense for housekeeping to come by this late. Normally, they clean the rooms during the day, and if you need something after hours, you call the front desk. My mind immediately went to all the stories I'd read online about scams and hotel thefts. But I told myself I was probably overreacting. Maybe they were short-staffed or had a new hire who didn't know the schedule. Still, something didn't feel right. I got out of bed and approached the door cautiously. The peephole was foggy, maybe scratched from years of use, so I couldn't see much beyond a vague silhouette. The voice called out again, "Housekeeping." "Just checking in." That didn't make sense. Why would housekeeping need to check in at 10 p.m.? I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lock. "What do you need?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. "Towels," she said finally. "I have fresh towels." "I didn't ask for any," I replied. Another pause. "Then, it's complimentary." I stepped back from the door, my heart starting to race. Something about her tone felt off. It was too rehearsed, like she wasn't used to saying it but thought it sounded convincing. My instinct screamed at me not to open the door. "No, thank you," I said firmly. "I'm fine." For a moment, there was silence. Then, I heard the faintest sound, like someone brushing against the door or leaning against it. My skin prickled. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated down the hallway. I waited until I couldn't hear them anymore before I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I double-checked the lock and slid the metal latch across for good measure. Then I sat back on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Maybe it was nothing, just a confused employee or a harmless mistake. But the feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. The rest of the night, I couldn't relax. Every little sound from the hallway made me tense up, imagining the worst. I eventually fell asleep with the lights and the TV on, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The next morning, I went down to the front desk. The woman behind the counter greeted me with a cheerful smile. I hesitated for a moment, not wanting to sound paranoid, but I finally asked, "Does housekeeping normally do rounds late at night?" "Around 10 p.m.? Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion. "No, not at all," she said. "Housekeeping finishes their shifts by 6 p.m. Was someone bothering you?" I told her what happened, trying to keep my voice calm. Her expression grew more concerned as I spoke. She assured me that no staff had been scheduled for my floor at that time and promised to look into it. I nodded, but the uneasy feeling in my stomach didn't go away. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the incident. I avoided the hotel as much as possible, spending hours in coffee shops and public parks, surrounded by other people. When I finally returned that evening, I asked for a different room, preferably on a higher floor. The staff accommodated my request without question, and I felt a small sense of relief. But that night, as I lay in bed in my new room, I couldn't stop thinking about the voice at the door. The pauses in her answers. The way she'd lingered, as if waiting for me to open up. I wondered what would have happened if I had. Would she have come in alone? Or was someone else waiting around the corner, out of sight? I don't know who or what was behind that door. Maybe it really was just a harmless misunderstanding. Or maybe it wasn't. All I know is that I've learned to trust my instincts, even when the logical part of my brain tells me I'm being silly. Sometimes, that gut feeling is all you have to keep you safe. It was a normal Friday night. I had been in my dorm all day, catching up on assignments and half watching a movie in the background. Around 6, I posted a picture of my dinner, just some takeout from the cafeteria, and tagged the location. It wasn't something I thought twice about. Everyone does it, right? After that, I settled in to finish a paper that was due on Monday. My roommate was out for the weekend visiting family, so I had the place to myself. It was quiet, and I liked it that way. It was around 10 when I heard the knock on the door. It startled me because I wasn't expecting anyone, and people usually text before they come by. I got up, thinking it might be someone from my floor, but when I opened the door, I didn't recognize the person standing there. He was tall, maybe late 20s or early 30s, with dark hair and a jacket that looked a little too heavy for the mild weather. He smiled at me like he knew me, but I had no idea who he was. "Hey," he said. "It's good to see you. It's been a while." I stared at him, confused. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" His smile faltered for a second, but he recovered quickly. "Yeah, we met at that thing last month. You probably don't remember. There were a lot of people there." I shook my head. "I think you have the wrong person." No, he said, laughing a little. "It's definitely you. You're my name, right?" Hearing my name come out of his mouth made my stomach twist. I nodded slowly, trying to figure out if I was forgetting something. Maybe we had met somewhere, but he didn't look familiar at all. "See," he said, like that proved his point. "I knew it was you. Mind if I come in? It's a little cold out here." That's when the alarm bells started going off. I didn't know this guy, and something about him felt off. I kept the door halfway closed and said, "I'm sorry, but I don't think I know you. Where did we meet again?" His smile tightened. "Like I said, at that thing last month. Look, it doesn't matter. I just thought I'd stop by since I was in the area." I glanced down the hallway. It was empty. Most people on my floor had gone out for the weekend, and the few who stayed were probably in their rooms with the doors closed. I was suddenly very aware of how quiet it was. "I'm sorry," I said again. "I think you might have the wrong person." His expression changed then. The friendly, casual demeanor slipped away, and he frowned, like he was annoyed. "Come on," he said. "Don't be like that. I came all the way here." I tightened my grip on the door, not opening it any further. "I think you should leave." He didn't move. His eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer to the door frame. "You posted you were here," he said. "Why would you do that if you didn't want people to know?" My stomach dropped. That's when it clicked. The picture I posted earlier. I had tagged my location, my dorm building. I hadn't thought twice about it at the time, but now it felt like the stupidest thing I'd ever done. I'm going to call campus security, I said, trying to sound confident even though my voice was shaking. You need to leave. He smirked. You don't need to do that. I'm just trying to be friendly. You don't have to make this a big deal. It's already a big deal, I said. Leave. Now. He didn't move for a second, and I thought he might try to force his way in. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Then he shrugged and stepped back, holding his hands up like he was giving up. Fine, he said. Whatever. I was just trying to be nice. I didn't respond. I closed the door and locked it as fast as I could, then stood there, listening. For a few seconds, I didn't hear anything, but then there was the sound of footsteps walking away. I peeked through the peephole and saw him heading down the hallway. I stayed by the door for a long time after that, listening and waiting. I didn't know if he was really gone or if he was just trying to make me think he was. I didn't hear anything else, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still nearby. After what felt like forever, I called campus security. I told them what happened, and they sent someone to check the building. They didn't find him, but they said they'd keep an eye out. They also told me to report it to the police, which I did the next day. I didn't sleep that night. Every little sound made me jump, and I kept thinking about how easily he found me. All it took was one post, one stupid little tag, and he knew exactly where I was. I don't post my location anymore. I don't even post pictures until hours after I've left the place. I don't know what he wanted or what he would have done if I had let him in, but I'm glad I didn't find out. I keep thinking about how insistent he was, how he acted like he had a right to be there. It wasn't just creepy. It was terrifying,